January 28th meeting of the Board of Directors. Mr. Chapman, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By the way, you know there's this new thing called Shave Club bucket.
Don't. I'm telling you. Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Carasali. Here. Mr. Farahi.
Here.
Mr. Findlen.
Here.
Mr. Lawson. Here. Mr. Lucey.
Here.
Mr. Mavrides.
Here.
Mr. McGovern.
Here.
Ms. Schieve.
All right. Looks like we have a quorum. Ms. Schieve did notify me that she will be a little bit late this morning. She has some other pressing matters to attend to. So I'm going to open up public comment at this time. Is there anybody wishing to speak in public comment? All right. Seeing none. Oh. Looks like Mr. Rogers.
Good morning, Chair, members of the RSCVA Board. For the record, Al Rogers with Washoe County, Office of the County Manager, Management Services Director. Thank you for the opportunity for a quick moment. Today I just wanted to thank the RSCVA and specifically the staff here with RSCVA through Ms. Cunningham and certainly Charlotte and Chad. Washoe County is very fortunate to utilize this facility for our strategic planning for the last 2 years. And it's just an awesome facility and an awesome support from this staff to provide that to Washoe County. We have had 2 successful years of strategic planning with Washoe County, and a lot of that is due to, again, the facility that's provided here, along with our partners to put that plan together. So, again, from Washoe County, thank you and appreciate the support.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr.
How much did you charge?
Wait a minute, John.
No comment.
All right. Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment, and I'm going to look for an approval of the agenda, but I'd like to make one change to the agenda at this time. I'd like to move the presentation of the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority up to our first order of business this morning prior to the General Government Division. So if I can get a motion for that.
Motion to accept.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right. So we're going to move on now for the approval of minutes from December 3rd, 2015 Board of Directors meetings. Any discussion at this time or changes that need to be made to the minutes? Looking for a motion. I have a motion from Mr. Carasali and a second from Mr. Mavrides. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Abstained.
Abstained.
I was
We have
out.
one abstention.
I wasn't here.
Mr. McGovern is abstained from that vote. So it looks like you got your count. Okay. Motion carries. Moving on. All right. We're on to presentations by the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority. Mrs. Mora. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so very much for this time this morning. How do I get this queued up? Charlotte, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing us this time this morning, because I can tell you that we've entered a time that I think we have the best relationship ever with RSCVA. So it's really, really great this morning to be here to talk about that. That's the end. Can I get to the beginning? So first of all, I just want to acknowledge Nat Carasali, who is the representative from the airport. RSCVA is also a trustee. Jessica Sferaza is one of our trustees, is here this morning, and we're going to talk a little bit this morning about what she's done to revitalize our Community Outreach Committee. And Rick Murdoch, who's our longtime trustee, has been our liaison for air service, and so he's also here. I want to introduce the airport team that's here supporting me this morning. Brian Culpin, who is our Vice President of Marketing and Public Affairs. And then I have a great duo in managing our air service program, co-managing it, and Hassan Azam and Rebecca Venus. So they're also here this morning. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity just to kind of update you on our efforts with RSCVA. So what I'm going to go over this morning is just talk about the Airport Authority. I'm going to talk about air service development primarily, and a little bit about what we're doing on the cargo side. And I think we jointly want to provide a positive environment at our airport for your customers that are coming in and our customers, and really so that they have a great impression when they come in of the community and when they leave. Just want to familiarize you with our board members. I've got to tell you, I think we have the best governance model because really we have trustees that represent all of our jurisdictions. And these are our trustees, our 9 trustees. Your RSCVA appointment is Andy Worth, who's the chair of the board currently. And unfortunately, he's out of town. I think he would have been here otherwise. And of course, we've got our vice chairman, Rick Murdoch, here. Last summer, we were fortunate we got 3 new board appointees, and Jessica Sferaza from the city of Reno was one of them, along with Jennifer Rose and Lisa Giannoli from Washoe County. And I got to tell you, these 3 new appointees have brought a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and energy to the board and a lot of great new ideas. So I'm really proud that we've got a great board that's very much oriented and focused on really achieving the best possible results for the Airport Authority. I know you're engaged in a strategic planning process, and I've got to tell you that the airport never had a strategic plan until the board adopted a strategic plan in June of 2013. And when I rejoined the Airport Authority in July of 2013, I was really happy to have a path going forward. What our strategic plan has done for us is really provided an alignment between staff and the board. And whenever there's a question, we refer back to our strategic plan. So it's a 5-year plan that we have, 2014 through 2018, and it really is our compass for the future. And there was a pretty much extensive public outreach process in developing the plan. We have 5 priorities, and I got to tell you that these priorities were not put in order of prioritization by our board, but the fact that air service is the first one physically on the list, we always kind of take that as our most important priority. But optimizing general aviation operations and services is also one of our priorities, and I think that was pretty much a knowledge throughout the community that there were years that we were at war with private pilots, and we've done a lot to enhance that relationship in the last couple of years. We're going to talk this morning about cargo development. I think cargo is really on the rise because of everything that's so wonderful happening in our community in terms of economic development. Economic development to us is really getting more money out of revenue out of our 2 airports, and so we're really very much involved in land development at both airports. And at the end of the day, I'm going to talk about this positive environment for our customers coming in for business or leisure into our community. So when we talk about air service development, what do we mean? On the passenger and cargo side, first of all, we want to maintain what we have. And I can tell you in recent years, that's been an important goal for us because we're an airport that, like many airports of our size, lost about 1/3 of our traffic. So we're in a rebuilding process. Again, we always work on growth in air service going forward. And we work on our airline relationships. It's so important to have relationships in any business, but we first of all work with the airlines that we currently have, and we're always courting new relationships with potential new carriers that we would like to see come into this community. Something that is new for us, I think, is really a much more robust community engagement. So what we found is we really need to engage the community in helping us both maintain our air service and grow it in the future. And I think this is where we're talking about how we've repartnered really with RSCVA to have a better relationship. And we always admire what LVCVA has, the relationship that they have between the Convention Authority and really the airport. And it was almost 2 years ago that we went over to LVCVA and sat down with them to talk about how they work together. And I think that going forward, I know Chairman Lucey and certainly Mayor Schieve really recently were at LVCVA meeting, I think late last year, and witnessed that partnership. And I think that that's a goal that we have going forward, to have that same kind of partnership between the airport and RSCVA here, similar to what you see in Las Vegas. We always talk about our catchment area, which is bigger than just certainly serving the cities of Reno and Sparks. Our primary area that is served by the airport is a population of 635,000. But when you look at all the other areas that we serve a population of 1.3 million. So when we go out to the airlines, this is what we talk about, a larger area that we do serve. I've got to tell you, 2015 was an amazing year for us. It was a record-setting year. Our passenger numbers were up 3.9%, almost 4%, and that's so important to us when we've lost about a third of our traffic. It was our first annual passenger growth in the last 10 years. So again, phenomenal year for us. And now we've had 7 consecutive months of year-over-year passenger growth. So good news, and I think it only looks better going forward. 2016, we expect to also be a great year. On the cargo side, we equally had a very, very good year, and the number was over 7% increase in the number of pounds of air cargo that we handled. But certainly the growth in this community of distribution and warehousing, that's what's driving certainly our cargo numbers. So it was our best year recorded in the history of the Reno-Tahoe International Airport for air cargo lift. Again, we've had 10 consecutive months of cargo growth. So really, really great news there as well. We love this route map because we're going to talk a little bit more about the service additions that we had over the last year that are making this such a better route map than what we had in the past. But the important addition, as you see here, was really the service to the East Coast. And what's phenomenal about having service to JFK is that there are probably about 60 countries that you can get to from JFK. So it really gives us that international connection that we didn't have before. We are very fortunate because for a community of our size to have 8 airlines serving the community is really, really a good thing. So we really like at the end of the day to leave the message that for a community and a population of our size, we have great air service. And again, you see all the logos of the airlines that are serving Reno-Tahoe International. Our new air service, many of you were involved in our announcements that we had a phenomenal year. Of course, we worked for 15 years to get JetBlue to come to this airport and to this community. And on May 28th, we had that service start. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how we all need to support that New York service. But we now have a daily service during peak season to JFK on JetBlue, which is a great airline. Guadalajara nonstop service, we hadn't had international air service for 15 years. And a year ago in December, we had Volaris start serving our community, providing service to Guadalajara. And it started with 2 flights a day and has now grown to 3 flights a day. We'll talk a little later, if we can solve some of our customs issue, we expect that Volaris will continue to add flights out of Reno. But this is great to have that Guadalajara service when we have such a large Hispanic population, and have that connectivity. Guadalajara is really, really a wonderful addition to our airport. Boise service started in November. We're going to talk a little bit about this service is suffering a bit. The load factors aren't where we need to have that. This is something that we heard about a lot in the community, that Southwest had pulled out of that market. Alaska is serving Boise, but we need support for Boise if we want to keep this flight. Orange County starts March 16, again on Alaska Airlines. This is an airline that has invested heavily in Reno-Tahoe International, and we need to support that service. This is another one that we heard a lot in the community about wanting Orange County. Yet another one that we had lost service to Oakland and Southwest Airlines. The first time they've put a flight back in a couple of years, they had dropped Oakland in 2013, and on June 5th, we see 3 times a day to Oakland, and we're going to see some great connectivity to other destinations out of Oakland with that flight with Southwest. And I think in the future, you're also going to see Southwest Airlines build up Oakland for international air service there, so potentially to Mexico. So a great addition, but again, we have to have people support all of this new air service. This is a dashboard that we are getting monthly from JetBlue, and I think we get asked a lot about how is the JetBlue service to New York doing. So what you see on here, and hopefully I'm going to work this pointer. Okay. What you saw is November, so this proxy column here, this is a proxy. What the proxy means is the airline compares us to other markets that maybe are a similar stage length or have a flight that has, a similar stage length of the distance that flight goes. We don't ever know what the proxy market is that we're being compared to, but what we saw is November is always the worst traffic month for the airport. So what we see is that compared to the load factor for Reno was 80.5%. So that was 5.4% under what they're looking at proxy markets. But again, that is always a slow month for the airport. Unfortunately, JetBlue had daily service when we had told them that is not the best month to have daily service. Our community gained, because many of you might have gone between November and mid-December, there were $69 airfares each way to JFK. Phenomenal rates. But what we're seeing is things start picking up December, January, and February, and going into them as we compare ourselves to, we're doing better. So things are doing well, and also if you look on the fare sides, things have really picked up on the fare side as well, because, again, it's wonderful for our community to have $69 airfares, but, the airline can't make money at that point. So, again, we see this dashboard every month. Things are looking better for JetBlue. And I think what's been interesting, this is what JetBlue provided to us, what they call a heat map to show you where customers are coming from. So the interesting point here is that we were actually also getting, for the JetBlue flights, the red eyes to JFK, we were also getting customers out of Sacramento. Now they have their own JetBlue flight, red eye, and they also have service to Boston, but probably the fares that we had going on in November and early December were driving some of that traffic. The bigger the circle, the more dense it is in terms of the color. That means more people are coming from that area. So I think what this shows is that really the JetBlue flight, our whole catchment area, is supporting that flight. Equally, JetBlue provided us with this map, heat map, to show us the customer base for New York flight. And again, it shows you, there's a pretty widespread support for that flight. So these are great metrics that, we're getting from the airlines now. I think of this quote really, I think there's been a lot of concern in the community. How is JetBlue doing? And to date, they are doing well. They are where they need to be. This is from their manager of route planning, the quote. But again, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind, and one of the conversations we're certainly having with RSCVA, is the marketing support for the New York flight really goes away in spring. And so we all have to gear up to put more money back into that flight come summer. And I think that, one of the famous sayings that we have of Rick Murdoch, our trustee, is use it or lose it. And we really need to have support from the community on an ongoing basis and more marketing support for this flight. Because again, we spent 15 years to get the JetBlue service, and that's not lose it. Just to tell you kind of what's next for air service development, again, we've talked about maintaining our current service. We want to make sure that we're putting the marketing support into our current service to keep it. We want to grow and expand with our current airlines. We have new target markets, and we want expanded international service really to fill out the time so that we have a better presence of customs officials processing our passengers. And then we're continuing our journey on community engagement. And one of the things that in that community engagement that we do is that, we think it's so helpful when we bring the people that we work with at the airlines, when we bring them to our community, they know what this community is about. Many of them have a dated view of what we have here. So we've started something called the Golden Ticket, so that they come to this community, whether it be winter or summer, if they want to do gaming, if they want to do skiing or boarding. We really, find their passion and try to, invite them and their family or their significant other to come to this community and experience. And this has been a very, very successful campaign. And I got to thank many of our partners are in this room today that help us really entertain those airline folks when they come to the community. Well, we're here this morning is really to talk about how we partner with RSCVA. And I can tell you we find a great partner in Jennifer Cunningham. And I think, again, as I started out saying, I think our relationship is really good and only going to get better with RSCVA. So we have the collaboration with RSCVA through the Regional Air Service Corporation. We have collaboration on new air service launches. And boy, it was a phenomenal event when we launched New York. We had a large group that went back to New York with media events. And, even though that flight came in very late at night, we had a wonderful welcome here in Reno. We're going to do, we did the same thing for Boise, and we're certainly on March 16th going to do the same thing for Orange County and on June 5th for Oakland. We have collaboration on air service development meetings. And when we recently went to Alaska Airlines, Jennifer Cunningham was there with us because it was very important that we talk about how we're going to support Alaska Airlines with marketing, because there's quite some angst, certainly, with Alaska Airlines because of the new Oakland service that Southwest plans to start in June. Again, we collaborate on market support and focuses. So one of the things that is new is that we have criteria of what is going to be the criteria for RSCVA to determine advertising and marketing support. And really, this is a joint effort between Jennifer Cunningham and the airport team. And here there are 4 different criteria. We've never had this established before. And I think it's a really good step forward, because our goals may be different than RSCVA. So we're looking at capacity. And one of the key things there is the flight has to have capacity to bring in new passengers, new tourists to the community. One of the things that talked about was like Portland. Are we going to advertise in Portland? Well, right now we vary between 2 to 3 flights a day with Alaska Airlines going to Portland. There are no additional seats, so it doesn't make sense to advertise in Portland until we have additional capacity to bring people into the community. Now, when Southwest Airlines goes into Oakland in June, we're probably going to be having people fly on Southwest Airlines to get to Portland. So that might be a time to advertise, Portland. But the fares have to be competitive so that customers want to book. Awareness, we think that, there should be some route awareness when you go into the market so you can really leverage the money that is spent. And then the route support, we want a route that has been identified. If there's a route that we know that is failing and we know that we have the potential to lose, we want the help from RSCVA to really bolster that flight up with potential marketing. So again, this is a first. I think it's a wonderful step forward to have criteria going forward. So with taking that criteria into mind, these are the target markets that we have mutually focused on between the airport and RSCVA. Northern California, the Bay Area, obviously we have air service, we have United Airlines in San Francisco, we have Alaska Airlines in San Jose, and again, that Alaska flight to San Jose is not doing that great. We are on the brink of potentially losing that again if we don't get more support. And then in June, we have 3 times a day flights starting with Southwest Airlines to Oakland. LA Basin, we've got LAX service, and again, we've got Orange County starting in March. Boise, again, this is a flight that needs help. And New York, we never want to lose that flight. We work too hard to get this flight. We need to keep it in this community. Great, connectivity to the East Coast and certainly to other places in the world. And we put San Diego on this list because with load factors of 70%, Southwest serves this market. There's capacity in that market to really bring more people in. And again, we don't want to lose that flight from the airport's point of view. Air service community engagement. We now have a year-round program, and we need to have, support really the flights in both our primary catchment area and our secondary catchment area. So it means really incumbent on us being back out in all of the different areas of where we serve the community. We want to highlight the importance of air service to the region. You know, people don't always think about airports generating jobs, but we are an economic generator, and we generate jobs, $2 billion a year to the local economy. We're going to talk just in a minute about the new direction with the Regional Air Service Corporation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about more about the education and the community about air service. And I've got to have a shout out to Jessica Sferaza, who is a new trustee, has come aboard and is revitalizing our Community Outreach Committee. We've known for a while that our Community Outreach Committee, which has been a standing committee for the airport for a long time, needed to be revitalized. And she's come in, and we had one meeting a few weeks ago, and it's now focused and has a blue ribbon committee, really, brought in terrific leaders, and I believe we have 19 members, but they are focused on air service. So we're just really, really energized due to her leadership on the Community Outreach Committee, and they will be meeting monthly. So now it is an action-oriented committee. We're so excited about that. The Regional Air Service Corporation. We actually have had support in the community since 2001, and it was a group called the Regional Marketing Committee, or RMC, until last year when the group incorporated primarily around the need to be able to sign a risk mitigation agreement with JetBlue. This is just a phenomenal change, and there's so many really positive things now happening with the Regional Air Service Corporation. The airport, because of federal aviation regulations, can only do so much. We cannot sign a revenue guarantee with an airline. We are very limited in what we can do. What we do is we waive landing fees and rental rates for a year with a new carrier coming in. We provide marketing dollars, but we have an incentive policy that's adopted by our board of trustees of what we do for one airline, we have to do for all airlines. That's why this group was first put together at the initiation of the airport back in 2001, really to have a community group that can help us, you know, shore up routes that are not doing well and could do better with marketing, and new routes that are launched. So this group, it's great now. They have signed an agreement, certainly with JetBlue, for a risk mitigation program, and are the signee on a risk mitigation program with Southwest Airlines for Oakland service. I think I've heard so much in the last 2.5 years that I've been back in this community that tourism was very frustrated that the support of air service at the airport was only on the backs of tourism. So a big effort of the Regional Air Service Corporation is to grow it going forward, that business comes to the table. So EDON has joined the Regional Air Service Corporation. We've had Switch, we've had NV Energy, we've had Dermody Properties put money into this, and Squaw Valley has also joined. So there is great momentum going forward. I got to tell you, another partner that's on this list that we see new momentum is Travel Nevada. The Lieutenant Governor, Mark Hutchinson, is going to be convening a group through NCOT that is focused on air service. I believe RSCVA is probably going to be represented there as well. And what we want is really to have Travel Nevada also focus their marketing money on air service, passengers that come, people that come into this destination and throughout Nevada by air, because they spend more money and they stay longer. So that's another important part of this, but we're very excited about the momentum that we now see with the Regional Air Service Corporation. But I can tell you that they almost make about a little bit, probably $600,000 a year that they bring in. Just this week there was news that the war chest that the Chamber of Commerce has in Tucson, when they have their own air service committee, they have $3 million put away for revenue guarantees. So that's the kind of competition we're up against. One of the things that, brilliant things that the team here at the airport came up with was an Air Service 101 session. And we have a couple of them on March 1, 2 more sessions. We've already had 2 sessions in the community, and then we have another one up at Lake Tahoe in April. Not only are we able to talk to the community about what is air service development all about and really spread the message about, you know, how we go about air service, how we need community engagement, but the brilliant part of this is every one of these sessions has also had one of our partners from the airline there at the table. So we get information from them, we bring them in early so that they can really enjoy our community, understand more of our community, and they also see the community engagement, and they're able to take that message back. So it develops our relationship with the airlines as well. One of the things, too, is we've done an internal class of our 250 employees at the airport. We've had about 60 attend this class, and so they're learning how we do air service development as well.
Lee, excuse me, could you explain how risk mitigation works in your negotiations with the airlines? I don't think it's an issue that a lot of people understand.
Sure. I'll just quickly take that question. You know, when we go in, we compete with over 400 other airports, and when you are pitching a route, the numbers have to be there. We have Hassan and Rebecca that look at the numbers. How many people travel on a daily basis to that destination? The numbers have to be there. But at the end of the day, there's an aircraft that they're going to be putting into a market, and they want to know that the community supports it, and we're maybe vying over another community to get that. So they want to know that we're a partner in the risk and the return on investment and the revenue that comes out of that. So distinguish ourselves to make ourselves, this community, go to the top of the list to get that asset with the aircraft and get that that route into our community. We should have to share the risk, though that is a revenue guarantee, and that's what we've had with JetBlue, and that's what we have with Southwest Airlines for Oakland. So it varies. You know, it's a confidentiality agreement that we have with each airline, so I know you're taking up something later today, but it varies. They have to have a return on investment within their company to put in a new route. So we share that risk with the airline. We also commit to putting money into marketing, and we can, as the airport, again, cannot do this. And so that's where we are very fortunate that we are unique among airports, because we have now a better community support system through the Regional Air Service Corporation. And I think as we get more businesses to join that, we will have, again, more money to put into those programs. I hope, Mr. Carasali, that I answered your question. Okay. Again, providing a positive experience. Unfortunately, we don't think that our customs experience has been that great. A little over a year ago, we put $4 million into our customs building. If you go right outside of baggage claim, you will see a grayish building, and that's our customs building. We had not had scheduled international air service for 15 years, so we needed to bring that facility up to today's security standards and pump $4 million into it. Customs didn't want us to have a flight to Mexico. They tried to stall us every step of the direction, every step of the way that we were doing those improvements. We proved them wrong. We did that improvement. We spent $4 million on the upgrade and did it in 38 days. So they had to finally award landing rights to Volaris. And so a year ago, December, we started that service, Volaris starting service to Guadalajara. Unfortunately, the situation for our customs processing has not gotten any better, despite a whole lot of effort from airport staff, I think from the community, and certainly efforts from our congressional delegation. The wait is at 2.5 hours. We only have 2 officers, and we have a port director, so very understaffed. Since the get-go, the last year and a half, we said we will pay for additional staffing, but they have no mechanism to accept that. So this is something that we are working with a congressional delegation on a daily basis to try to resolve this, and it probably will take a legislative change to allow us to pay, have a mechanism to pay for additional staffing. I got to tell you also that we had a news conference on December 21st. We've been very concerned about the treatment of our passengers, particularly our Hispanic passengers, and many of you might have heard about a 15-year-old that traveled into our facility right after Thanksgiving, and so we went forward and complained to also the customs folks about how our passengers are being treated. I do believe they've made some improvement of how they're treating our passengers, but again, I think it, hand in hand with how they're treating passengers and certainly the processing time, this has got to change. Surprisingly to us, Volaris added a 3rd flight last November, and they had told us they were not going to add another flight into Reno until the processing time was down to 90 minutes. So it tells you that they're doing extremely well in Reno, and we were one of their 5 top flights, certainly in terms of the revenue that they added in the U.S. So we have the opportunity, probably with Volaris, to add additional flights when we can improve, when there's an improvement by customs in the processing time. But
Mr. Murdoch, You got to come up and, for the record,
Come
sorry
on up,
about
come
that.
on.
I think it's really incumbent on this organization to understand that the CDP turned down a flight from Thomas Cook Travel, London, England, and that would have been coming in here from November through March. I think we really need to, as a community, reach out to Washington, D.C. That is not acceptable. That would have been a lot of money coming into this community for 4 months and started England nonstop to Reno, Nevada. I think that's really important for you all to know that. That's exactly the truth. It's all stuck in Washington, D.C. CDP is not real user-friendly in Reno. We're controlled by the Port of San Francisco. So anything you would do as a community or leaders, write your letters, call your congressman. It's a big issue for us. I think it would really help us. And especially we had snow.
Rick, Senator Reid, what does he say?
Pardon? Senator Reid has made a personal phone call late December to the head of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And when that gentleman said, I'll have our staffs get back to you, Senator Reid said, absolutely not. They're going to get back to me. So based on the efforts of Senator Reid, and we've actually had Senator Heller involved in this and Congressman Amodei. Congressman Amodei also had a meeting with like the number 3 person in CBP. Based on that activity, we had a fix-it guy come out from Washington, D.C. on December 17th. We're very disappointed so far in what that fix-it guy is suggesting we do. We just renovated our customs building a year ago and reopened it. And what he came in the door and told us is, oh, well, if you reconfigure it again, perhaps you can improve the processing time. No metrics about how that might improve the facility. What we're asking for is additional staff. Don't tell us to go spend a couple more $1 million to reorient the facility. So there's a lot of pressure on from Senator Reid, Senator Heller, and Congressman Amodei. Give us an answer. Don't just come in here and tell us that maybe if we spend a little bit more money, we can improve the processing time. We need more people processing the flights.
Ms. Farahi.
One more point to this group as well. As you know, a lot of cities, they get subsidies from their state. Their state subsidizes their airline funds. We use RASC, and what we've learned is, it's always been the tourism community and the ski community that has ponied up. But we're going to all the businesses, especially coming in to sign up and be in RASC because we need money. And again, the way the state structured their budget, I know Nat led a drive to get some money from the state specifically for it. I know Mark Hutchison's on it, but it's a big issue with us. We need more money to compete, to keep these airlines into Reno, Nevada. So I'm sorry, I just want to say a few words.
Rick,
Thank
on
you.
Thomas Cook, is there an opportunity to bring him back if we resolve this issue, or they're gone?
Well, I tell you right now, we're not servicing, because the Thomas Cook flight would have been 300, an Airbus 330, over 300 passengers. And that would have required an upgauge to our customs facility. We were perfectly willing to do that from the airport side, using passenger facility charge money. But there's no sense in us and making a bigger facility when they will not even staff the facility for 200 passengers an hour processing. So I think, what we're focused on now is making it right for flights that have under 200 passengers an hour. And then going forward, we'll go the next place up and, have a flight to Europe in the future. But we're not, we thought we could get there when we entertained, over a year ago, having that flight start in December to Gatwick. We thought we would get there. We did a fast track on improving the facility, and we were going to go the next step and make it even larger. But there's no sense in spending a lot of money, and that improvement would have cost about $7 million if they're not going to staff the facility. So we've retrenched and said we need to get the staffing for the Volaris and bring in similar size aircraft for the facility, and then we can, go the next step. But they just were not cooperative any way that we could work with them.
Excuse me. Nat again. Mary Lee?
Oh, please.
I was just going to make a comment that we attempted to have a line item in the Governor's Economic Development Program in the last legislature, and we're not able to because of the monies committed to Tesla and so forth. we will go back to the legislature to the next session and ask for the same thing again, a line item in the governor's economic development plan. We would like to have a fund somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 15 million or whatever, which certainly would service southern and northern Nevada. It is our goal to do that. We are lobbying heavily as we talk today, so we hope that at that point we can get that started, which would be a tremendous asset for our airport. So any time you talk to a legislator, would you please let them know we support air service, and we would support an air service risk assistance program in their economic development plan.
Thank you, Mr. Carasali.
I'm wrapping up here. I know I'm running long. Thank you very much, Chair. So I just want to take a moment to tell you some other things that are going on at the airport. We are launching an airport master plan because ours is over 20 years old, and with things happening in our community, like the EPIC study showing over 50,000 new jobs, there's a number of triggers that really we see that it's important for us to do a master plan update. And these will be providing, certainly a forecast for the future. It's an 18 to 24-month study that we'll be doing. TSA pre-check, you can now enroll at the airport, $85 for 5 years of pre-check. Now, our pre-check is generally open for early morning up until 5 o'clock. The pre-check location is right in our ticketing area, and a permanent location will be there as well. Right now, they're running 3 days a week, but I can tell you that there's an uptick in certainly pre-check enrollments. Many of you may know in December, the TSA had a news conference to announce that they wanted more people to enroll in this, and then they said the service would be stopping in Reno. We said, absolutely not. We're not going to see a gap in this service till next spring. They can bring it to the airport, and so we've got a lot of people that are using pre-check now. One other thing I want to mention is that Global Entry, which is a $100 program for 5 years. It's you get pre-check as part of that, and Global Entry you have no access to Global Entry in this community right now because it includes an interview, and you now have to go to San Francisco or Las Vegas or some other city to get that interview. We're going to have a mobile Global Entry process here at some time in the next couple of months here in the community. They're only going to probably be here for 2 days and be able to sign up 80 people, but we are going to be probably engaging with the Community Outreach Committee of how to make that opportunity available. I want to tell you that last week we're really happy because Uber started service last Wednesday. And Lyft is signing an agreement with us today, and we'll be starting service at the airport tomorrow. So great new thing, I think, service to have the transportation network companies starting service at Reno Tahoe International. They were very focused at the get-go after getting the okay with it through the state legislature on McGovern. And now we kind of got their attention, and we've got the permits. And the area where you have pickups is right outside baggage claim, past the area where the taxis pick up. So great new service, I think, now at the airport. They were allowed to drop off passengers, but until last week, Uber could not pick up, and until with the signing of a permit today, Lyft will be going forward as of tomorrow. We had a customer satisfaction survey, and we always like to know how we're doing, and we had great ratings. Just to tell you that this is something that we're measuring on an ongoing basis because, again, we want to have a really positive experience at the airport for people coming and going. I want to thank really a partnership with Jennifer Cunningham and John Linen because we are so excited that we are bringing the 21st International Aviation Conference put on by the Boyd Group is coming to our community September 18th to the 20th. And it's really, really exciting because this actually dovetails with the National Championship air races, and the air races are going to be held from September 14th to the 18th, and we got the Blue Angels coming this year. So this is a conference, while it's not large in size, about 500 people, it attracts the CEOs of all the airlines because there are speakers at this conference. And so we're really, really excited because it gives us a great marketing opportunity for these CEOs and high-level decision makers from the airlines to come see our community and also experience the, the air races. That's going to be another attraction for them. They've been in Las Vegas for the last 2 years is where this conference was, and so they specifically told us that we needed to partner with Lake Tahoe, and so we do have the resort at Squaw Creek. We are going to be partnering with local hotels to have a pre-package here in Reno. So John and Jennifer were very much involved in the get-go with bringing this conference here, so I want to thank you for that. We're truly excited. This is a great time to showcase our community. So I want to thank you for the time. This has been a great opportunity to talk to you about our new energized partnership with RSCVA, and just really appreciate the opportunity to share with you what's going on with the at the airport and how we're partnering better with RSCVA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mora. Any questions at this time from the board? Doesn't seem like there's any. So.
I've spoken too long. That's why.
No, your extensive presentation has been fantastic and long overdue, so thank you very much. At this time, Mrs. Brandhorst has signed in for public comment on this item. Ms. Brandhorst, you have 3 minutes for public comment. Tell her to keep it on top. Yeah. And Mrs. Brandhorst.
No,
Ms. Brandhorst. If you could please keep on topic of the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kathy Brandhorst, Lisa Marie Presley, John Benet Ramsey, John Steele, and I'm also the United States President. I just wanted to let you know I was on the aircraft. The air pilot was shot. There was nobody on the aircraft to fly the aircraft at all. And so they asked me to take over and fly it. I did take over that aircraft, and I flew that airplane into safety because the air pilot was dead. How many lawsuits is this going to cause for people to show, right? It's going to tell us that the lawsuits are so expensive on that death of that aircraft, the airport flyer. He is an air pilot, and he died. So who's going to be responsible for all those lawsuits? It will be the airport in itself. And the airport cannot afford to actually pay for the lawsuits, because what happens to all the passengers that had to pay for their fare? They always say that the airport is broke. Yes, it is broke. It's supposed to be out of business because of this reason. They also go on the aircraft with their machine guns and shoot the passengers down. That's also the lawsuits. Who's going to cover for those lawsuits? It will be the airport. There won't be no money left to run the airport because of those lawsuits. The money is not going to be circulating at the airport at all. They also have to steal my aircraft in order to my air jet to use at the airport and charge the customers nothing because they cannot afford to even charge them on my aircraft, because where's my money? So I just wanted to briefly tell you how I feel about the airport. Also, the Air Jet Blue. It's going down into Mexico, the old border of Mexico, and nobody survives on that aircraft at all.
All right. Seeing no other public comment at this time, and this is not an action item, we will move forward and on to our General Government Division discussion. So at this time, we're agenda item 1, appointment of board member pursuant to NRS 244A-601 1D, representing gaming and representing the gaming establishments. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As board members are aware, Ms. Carano resigned her seat on this board effective November 23rd. In your materials, Ms. Carano was a nominee of the Nevada Resort Association. In your materials is a letter from Virginia Valentine on behalf of the Nevada Resort Association nominating Mr. Kevin Winters to replace Ms. Carano and serve out the remainder of her term. This item is open for discussion by the entire board, but is only voted on by the elected officials. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Is there any discussion at this time? Seeing none, I will look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Kevin Winters as an appointee from the Nevada Resort Association.
And I will second your motion, Mr. Lawson.
All those in favor?
All those in favor? Are you in favor?
I'm in favor.
All right, we're in favor. Say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mayor Schieve being absent. So, welcome aboard, Mr. Winters. We're glad to have you here. Obviously, continue to representing downtown area and the casinos in Harrah's. So, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
No, excuse me. Kevin is not representing downtown area. Kevin is representing the industry for the betterment of the whole community.
Thank you, Mr. Farahi, for
Thank
that
you.
clarity. That clarity. Thank you. All right. On to agenda item 2, discussion regarding committee structure. At this time, I want to discuss with everybody. I've had a brief opportunity to speak with everyone over the last couple of months, and when the mayor and I took a trip to Las Vegas to visit the LVCVA and Rossi Rollencotter and view their procedures and how they operate their board, the one functional thing that I saw that was beneficial, and I think now that we've decreased our size from last legislation from the 13 members down to 9, it makes it very difficult for us to continue to have subcommittees at this time. And the one thing the LVCVA does well is that they don't have subcommittees other than a finance audit committee. And other than that, every issue is brought in front of the board in its entirety. So there isn't any marketing committee, there isn't any operations committee. Every opportunity that needs direction above and beyond the executive team comes in front of the board. And I believe at this time, I would like to shift the way we have been doing business here at the RSCVA from the board standpoint, and disband currently the operations and marketing subcommittees and maintain just the finance and audit committee. So that would be my direction right now. At this time, I feel it's more feasible. It's a better usage of our time. These meetings can be, as Mr. Lawson and I know, it can be extensive at times, and so they're difficult to schedule. So I'd look to the board for some discussion on this item. Mr. Farahi.
Chair, the issue on the marketing committee, I want to ask the staff, how are you guys going to share information? How are you going to get input from properties if there is no marketing committee? Now, having said that, I'm a strong believer that we don't need to have marketing meeting every month and take a lot of time, and the staff is taken away from getting the job done. If we decide to have a marketing committee, I think once every quarter should be plenty to just share thoughts with the properties and get their input. And but I agree with you that, Mr. Chairman, we have too many meetings, committees, and all it does is waste time.
Mr. Carasali.
I agree with what John said, but also I think if we're just going to get presentations from staff, then they have to be well researched and vetted and have all the proper and necessary information so you can make a valid decision. Okay?
Agreed. And I think a big part of this, Mr. McGovern, go ahead.
Well, you know, I didn't sit on the marketing committee, or I'm not on the current marketing committee, but having sat on it last year, I think one of the things that I witnessed is that extensive presentations were given to the marketing committee. We adopted that. That same presentation was given by the marketing committee 2 weeks later at the board meeting. So it really was very redundant to at least the members of the marketing committee. I think it's a valuable savings of everybody's time.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. And the other issue is that, to Mr. McGovern and Mr. Carasali, to your point, it is redundant, and we create, but there does need to be some vetting prior to the board meetings if those presentations are going to be brought forth. So those presentations need to get to the board in a more timely manner, more than just 3 days. We need to have significant time if there are major decisions that are going to need to be made that are going to be vetted by the executive, but we need to have significant time to do that as well.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
And I don't think you're going to measure the vetting and researching in piles of paper. You can measure it in a concise, short report backed up by that if need be. Okay? So
Yep.
the simpler the better.
Agreed. Mr. Farahi.
Actually, can we get the input from Jennifer? I'd like to hear whether she thinks it's useful or not.
Well, I agree with Mr. McGovern where we would present to the Marketing and Sales Committee, and then within a matter of a week, we were representing to half the group again. I think a quarterly committee meeting is a nice kind of compromise, and things that need to be vetted out and go into more detail prior to can be done so. Getting our packets out as early as possible is a plus. I would like to suggest that we do maintain some level of flexibility, so if an issue comes up that we want to vet with a committee structure, that we have the ability to call a committee meeting to address that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Cunningham. Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Chair, in our conversation earlier, one of the items that I brought up might address Ms. Cunningham's comment that if the staff members all had a board liaison that they could talk to vet things with, to get the tone or the temper of the board, if they had a question, rather than an entire committee, but an individual that they knew that they could go to, that might be beneficial.
Ms. Cunningham.
An idea that Chair Lucey and I have been kicking around is to have a bi-weekly breakfast meeting with the executive board of the executive staff of our board. And maybe that would be a good vehicle to, as a facility issue arises, to present it in front of that group for somewhat of a direction or a sales issue.
And that was another point. Mr. Carasali, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, there was one other point that we brought up as well, is reinstating and making sure that the chair and vice chair and their secretary and treasurer were available for executive meetings. It would be a quorum, so we might have an issue with that, so we might have to minimize that to 3 members of the board for the executive team, but still have those those board members meet with the executive team on every 2 week, bi-weekly basis to field some of the smaller issues that may arise. Mr. Carasali.
I kind of disagree, because I don't think the temperament or the wishes of the board make any difference. The facts are the facts. When you get an item that's going to be discussed, whether you move forward with it or not, it's the facts that help you determine your decision. You don't have those till you get it all vetted. So to be able to tell them, well, I think of this and that, you don't really know until you have the facts. Facts are golden.
Agreed. So looking for some direction here from the board, if we'd like to maintain the structure as is currently, modify it to some arrangement that we have discussed here, or abolish them altogether and just maintain a finance committee for a multitude of financial issues. Mr. Lawson.
I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Farahi, and let's try the quarterly marketing for a year and see how that works out, and then we'll make a decision going forward from that.
Okay.
That way it's not a drastic change, and we still are accomplishing something there if we have to.
Okay, and then with in regards to operations, I think operations, a lot of operations issues fall directly with finance a lot of times. So would that be okay, would it be, that'd be something that the board would allow, is to combine those two board, or those two subcommittees into one under the finance committee? Mr. Carasali.
I like what trustee, or Mr. Lawson said. So can we have a motion, Ed, what you said, and I would approve that, and go for that.
And I want to throw out one more thing that we use at Sparks, is I have a meeting once a month with my community development department, which tells me what we're going to see in the next 30 to 60 days. So I can go into depth on any portion of that I want. I don't know if that works so much for the council here, but then I also have another meeting with the city manager that tells me direction and what kind of vision that he has for the future. Both of those meetings are half an hour to 45 minutes, and once a month. It keeps me as a council member. It's a little harder with 9 members, I know, but something that might be a suggestion. But I'll make a motion to start, is that we change the marketing committee meeting to quarterly, beginning, do we have a beginning date?
Effective immediately.
Effective today. And we move operations into finance.
I have a motion. I have discussion, Mr. Farahi.
I would like to say even finance could be once every quarter, except if there is something important comes up that the chair would like to convene the finance committee, they can call for that. So we become more organized than that. So we merge the two, but we make it quarterly, except if there's something urgent comes up.
Okay. Well, hold on.
I second.
Okay. Mr. Mavrides, further conversation.
I think if we go this way, which is fine, we're going to have more and more things to look at in detail. I'd like to see the packet out a week in advance of the regular board meeting to give us a little more opportunity to spend some time reviewing it.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to combine finance and operations into one, and to convene marketing at a quarterly manner.
And if I can just clarify, we're referencing operations committee. I think in our internal documents is the facilities committee.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about. And so we've got
Facilities.
we've got the motion to combine them and do the marketing quarterly, and then a proposed amendment to that motion to also include the finance committee as quarterly.
Yes, except if there is something urgent, we can get together sooner if the chair asks for a meeting to be convened. And I'd like to second that too. We need the packages a week in advance, please.
And may I just check, is that doable?
The agenda, which sets the information for the packet, gets posted 3 full business days before the meeting. So the only challenge would be if something came up at the last minute that we needed to change the agenda in the 5 days prior to when it would normally be posted.
Good.
So the whole packet would have to be redone if the agenda was updated.
Yeah.
It absolutely can be done.
So I think we have a couple issues here. We've got the committees, the quarterly meetings, combining some committees, and then we have an issue with the meeting packets. The meeting packets aren't on the agenda. It's not something I think that we need to take board action on. I think that's just general direction from board chair to staff to let's try to assemble those packets sooner. So I think at this point we've got your motion, a proposed amendment. If you'll accept that.
I'll accept the amended motion by Mr.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen. On to our next line item of business is our strategic plan update approval in contract with On Strategy and recommendation of On Process. This has been an interesting topic here for us as a board and an executive team over the last year. We have gone through extensive work at this point with Mr. Kotz and CSNL in regards to building us a destination market analysis and a strategic plan. That plan was initiated over 18 months ago.
A year ago, December.
2 years.
almost 2 years, but I know long before I was on the board, let's just put it that way. And to date, we were scheduled to have a strategic plan retreat. I know, obviously, I tried to schedule that with everybody in January. And when we received the data back and the direction that we got from Mr. Kotz in CSNL, the assessment had not changed, and the strategic plan was non-existent in regards to how we should be moving forward. And there were a lot of concerns voiced by the members of the board here that still were not addressed within the strategic plan. At that time, I recommended to Mrs. Cunningham to seek some outside help in regards to helping us frame a strategic plan or get the process back on track so that we would not have a meaningless board retreat. And at that time, we brought On Strategy. Erica Olson with On Strategy was brought to us, or recommended to us, by a number of facets. Now, Erica Olson has done the strategic planning for the City of Reno, the City of Sparks, Washoe County, Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority, and RASC as well. So they have they're very knowledgeable within the area and the entities within the Reno-Tahoe area, but also somewhat involved with the tourism industry. So with that being said, we had asked them to participate. It was within Mrs. Cunningham's financial signing ability, and she executed a primary contract with On Strategy to bring them on to help us carry strategic plan forward and make sure that it was executed in the best manner possible. Now, I want to clarify that the strategic plan is essential for a number of different reasons, not only just for the success of the RSCVA, but recently within legislation for the new surcharge that was added. Mr. Rivers, can you give me what's a soft number that we're looking at currently? I think it was
4.1 million for this year, 4.5 for a full year.
4.1 to 4.5 annually over going forward. And when you talk about a strategic plan process, this is talking about funds that it's going to give us direction for funds of over 21 million over the next 5 years. So I want to make sure that this plan is done correctly and done right and brought forth in the best manner forward. And after long conversations with the executive team, I've had individual conversations with the board, and also meeting with Erica Olson. I feel that this is the best course of action for us to really fulfill what we are looking for as a board in regards to a strategic plan. And the other issue that we also have is currently that since we are without a CEO and we are entering into our budgeting season, we needed some operation strategy as well. And On Strategy has been very functional in helping us do that so that the board can have direct impact on how we're going forward with budgeting into the next fiscal year. And as we heard earlier from Mrs. Mora, how important it was that a strategic plan and good operational plan was in place when she stepped into her position at the Reno-Tahoe Airport Authority to make it a seamless transition for her. So with that said, I would like to invite Mrs. from On Strategy. I'd like to have Chelsea and Howard please come up and introduce yourselves. And move forward with a short presentation of where we currently are and their presentation on how we will be moving forward with the process. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Chairman Lucey. As a quick introduction, my name is Chelsea Vors. I'm presenting to you today on behalf of On Strategy because Eric Olson is unfortunately unable to join us. Also have Howard Olson from our team who'll be speaking specifically about the market research segment.
Thank you, Chelsea. So Erica's not with us. She's had the primary responsibility working with a lot of public entities in town and so forth. And just to rest assured, she is an integral part of what we're doing as we go forward. She just is in a transition. We were going to do a board retreat, and we changed things around so she could be at the board retreat, and this change around happened to be put her in on East Coast today, so that's where she's at. She'll be working with us on an ongoing basis. My role in working with this is I'm a CPA, plus I have a PhD in marketing, so I head up the research side, and that seems to be where we need to do a lot of extra work. So that's will be my place to move forward. But Chelsea would like to explain kind of what the process is, how we're going to pull all this thing that Chairman Lucey has talked about, both the planning process as well as the operational standpoint too.
Thank you so much. So, you know, in starting off, I just want to say that I've had the opportunity to speak with many of you over the last 4 weeks as we've had our phone meetings with Richard Wells, Chairman Lucey, Erica Olson, and myself. And I also know that On Strategy has had the opportunity to work with many of you in different capacities, as we mentioned, Washoe County and RTAA. So with that being said, for those of you that we haven't had a chance to work with, I think it's important to kind of kick off today's presentation and speaking a little bit more about On Strategy. We are a local company, so what do we do? What are we all about? And what will that work look like for the RSCVA specifically? So jumping right in and kind of to illustrate our philosophical approach to planning and our manifesto, I just want to illustrate a few local projects that we're actually currently working on. So speaking to them briefly. So fundamentally, we're not about starting work from scratch. We're not about redoing work done by others. And so what that means is we are leveraging all of the work and expertise presented thus far by John Kotz. We're also leveraging all of the resources that have been invested by the RSCVA. So hitting the ground running with that, it's important to acknowledge that we are not tourism industry experts. We're strategic planning experts. And we know that great strategy depends on a solid market understanding. We have the resources on our team to do that the right way. And so these are a number of projects that we're intimately involved with here locally that Howard has actually spearheaded over the last several years. So you may recognize a few of them as having some local implications. Secondly, with regards to our approach to strategic planning, we're practical. So at the end of the day, we major on the majors, and we don't believe in long, drawn-out processes. We're not just facilitators. We're definitely not touchy-feely facilitators. We're business-minded people. We work with just as many business entities as we do government agencies. So in addition to the many clients that we're working with nationally, these are a few that we're working with here locally. As you can see, we're industry agnostic. We work with business, government, and nonprofit entities alike. So finally, with regards to our manifesto, we don't believe that strategic planning is about building a plan. It's about delivering results at the end of the day. And so we continually stress the importance of this with each of our clients to drive accountability through the implementation and execution management processes. So again, a few list of clients, many of which we've worked with 5, 7, and 10 years plus to help them gain traction and drive accountability with their teams. So with that introduction to our company and where we're coming from and presenting to you today, I want to just kind of briefly call out the 3 things that I think are important that we address. Number 1, as Chairman Lucey walked us through the current status of our project with John Kotz, understanding kind of where we are today and how we're perceiving that recommendation moving forward. I'll walk us through the second agenda item, which I'll touch on here in a minute, and then I'll pass it back to Chairman Lucey to talk to us specifically about the investment in the strategic planning process. So what I'd like to spend about 15 minutes going over with all of you today is number 1, board expectations. This is something we obviously take very seriously and we will use not only to design the process, but to execute moving forward. And having had those conversations and insights, we've developed a list of strategic issues, and those are essentially those things that absolutely need to be addressed as part of the strategic planning process. So in judicious planning, that is strategic issues, and we'll talk about those today. Next, I want to frame up basically how we're going to be delivering on this, specifically talking about the deliverables that we're committing to getting to you as a board, as well as the milestones that we're kind of managing that project against. Finally, I'll speak to a couple guiding principles that we've put together kind of for our own edification and grounding as we move forward. This is going to be a process over the next several months, so we want to be sure that we're maintaining kind of the core essence of what we're trying to achieve as an organization. So as I mentioned, we've spoken with all of you over the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks now maybe, And this is basically what we've heard that you want out of a process. And so this is just an abbreviated kind of high-level snapshot. And for a more detailed report, you have a binder in front of you that has a full board insight kind of report that we can refer to later. But what I want to be sure to call out, and what resonated with all of us, that I think, again, kind of getting back to grounding where we are in the presentation, is that we're all in agreement that we want to have a data-driven discussion and make decisions accordingly, but we also want to be succinct and focus on that stuff that matters and get the plan done. And so we'll remain keenly aware of balancing those two priorities. So based on those individual meetings, these are the high points that we've captured. We have since evolved the project and process accordingly so that we can kind of take this, and we're not a company that has a cookie cutter approach to strategic planning. So we've taken your input, we've designed a process accordingly that specifically leverages the work done to date and just parlays that into a planning process that we're sure and hope will meet your expectations. So building into that a bit further and a bit more details is with the strategic issues. Again, this is something that you do in any good strategic planning process. You basically call out those things that are non-negotiables. These are the things that need to be addressed and or answered and vetted as part of the process. And so again, these are a direct reflection of the conversations that we've had with you over the last 5 weeks, as well as the conversations that started 18 plus months ago when we kicked off this process. So just to kind of walk us through this list, we know that we need to obtain an understanding and agreement around the core purpose and scope of the RSCVA to ground us in why we exist as an organization and what we do. We need a clear understanding of our direction over the next 5 years, and we need to be smart in setting that direction, so knowing which businesses we should be in and how to grow those priority segments. We need to be data-driven in our understanding of where to focus our marketing spend, and we also need to determine the most appropriate allocation of the surcharge fund. Jumping back up there, for each line of business, we need to deep dive into historical information and market data, and the purpose of this being to have a very clear and solid understanding of why we're winning or why we're losing, and adjust accordingly. A couple more things. We need to continually improve the image and brand of the Reno-Tahoe area. I think that's something that we're all well aware of on a daily basis. And we need to establish a process to manage performance and drive accountability moving forward. So that's kind of this underlying assumption throughout the whole process. You know, I wanted to take us through that list because we take very seriously the fact that our success in this process is not only measured against meeting your expectations, but specifically addressing these issues, which is why we've made a point of calling that out really explicitly. So deliverables, what can you expect from us? With an understanding of what your expectations are and what we need to address as part of this process, it's important to call out kind of how we're going to go about doing this and the deliverables that you can expect for us. So the process of building the RSCVA plan is not like most strategic planning processes. Let's just be very clear about that. We're not building one plan. We're essentially building 8 plans. So we're asking really complicated questions. We're going pretty granular with our understanding of the market data, and we're going really deep. So again, I want to reiterate that we are leveraging all of the work done to date, and basically where we are in the process is rounding all of that out and taking it to inform a really complex strategic planning process. So specifically, we'll have an overall RSCVA corporate plan that will include each of the items listed underneath. We will then have a business plan or a strategic plan for each line of business, again, inclusive of all of the items that you see listed below. So the way that we structure this, and we have done planning like this before, is to essentially do a bottom-up roll-up. So we're developing a strategic plan for each of these lines of business. Howard will speak more specifically to that, but each of these will be reverse aligned and carried up into that of the corporate plan. So there will be kind of direction down as well as information feeding up to the board retreat. So without getting too into the weeds, I'd like to quickly pass it to Howard to talk about specifically how we've designed the research portion of this project, knowing that we're kind of partially in that mix. What does it look like moving forward? And so he'll speak to us about the research portion and how we're approaching the issue to get basically the best handle on the opportunity landscape for each of our lines of business. So with that, Howard.
Mr. Farahi, excuse me.
I think it's critical that there is a clear understanding that what CSL John Katz is doing and what they are going to be doing are apples and oranges. The CSL John Katz is doing market research, which is critical because they are the expert in market research. You guys are not a specialist in tourism and that.
Correct.
John Katz is a specialist in tourism, so that's critical to know. What John Katz could not deliver to us is to put a strategic plan together how we're going to implement that study. And that's where you guys' role is coming in, that you're going to be working with John Katz to get that information and develop it into a 5-year strategic plan to implement. Is that what I'm saying? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Because there may be.
Thanks for
I mean,
bringing
we
that
had
clarity.
to have had John Katz to do this study so we can go to this next stage of how we're going to implement it.
Correct.
So you are going to be working closely with John Katz on all these categories to put your plan in place that you're going to be presenting to this board.
Mr.
Absolutely.
And that's correct. And let me just speak to that really quick before you get going here, Howard. We did speak with John Kotz, Howard, Chelsea, Erica, Richard Wells, and Jennifer, myself, put together a punch list, an email list of data that we didn't have, data we still felt was necessary to move forward. And so with that, we've sent that over, but John is still going to be an integral part in this process as we move forward, and also to the strategic plan retreat, because he will be there as a destination market expert. But we felt at this time we really needed a strong facilitator to get this process completed.
I just want that to be clear.
Absolutely. So, Howard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Farahi, for I guess you could say, taking that and unpacking it a little bit more, because you've made, you being RSCVA boards, have made a substantial investment in where you are today, in what you have, in what John Kotz and his team have presented is very great information, a lot of good market information. A lot of it's going to be part of the planning process. There's a lot of action items that are in there. But what we're bringing to the process, because we work kind of across the board, we're bringing the process to be able to put it together and synthesize it. So with Richard Wells' help, we're taking a Mint database with a couple 100,000 lines of information in it from John Leinen. He's got a production database as well. There's the facilities side. They're using their databases, integrating all that together. Got John Kotz's information. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring all of this stuff together to make sense, roll it up, so you can, as the board, can make strategic decisions, not tactical decisions. We're trying to bring it to the point so that you can understand what you need to do and then set the direction for the board. So the point that I had with the chairman was that we have more than enough, I shouldn't say more than enough, we have a lot of information to make definitely a comprehensive strategic plan. I mean, we're not out there in weeds, we're not going to need to go out and get a bunch more research done outside. We've got enough to take what we need to do. So we know we need to bring it together. So the best way we felt from looking at the operations and so forth is we compartmentalize it into what we call the 7 lines of business. And in each one of those, quote, lines of business, there's an internal and an external side of that. So the external side has the customer piece. We're taking the information that we have from the databases to try to build this information out. You have an example in your packet there about the bowling, the competitor side of the bowling. So we're rolling that all up into, we're taking the external side, but then the external side then drives what's going on internally. And some of those internal sides, obviously, because of the facilities, roll across a number of those lines of business. So I'm not going to go through all those points, but you can kind of see what we're trying to do. We need to get our hands on what our customers are saying. What is the market saying? Not what we think. We've been doing enough of that. I've been in business long enough, and I've done enough of I think stuff, and I know where that got me. So what we're trying to get the data together, let that speak, and then let you make your strategic decisions on top of that. So it elevates your decision. So for example, just looking at the bowling side of things, at the tournament bowlers who are the committed bowlers and so forth. So what is the total market? I mean, what is that? I mean, people bowl all around the United States. So if you start digging in a few things, you'll see there's about 1.6 million USBC bowlers. Now, those are the committed. Those are ones in the tournament. They're going to come here. But if you dig a little bit further, you find out about a quarter of those type of bowlers don't register, they're not certified. So in theory, we're dealing with a total market out there of a couple million. So then we look back at what have we done over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and we find our market share's been in the 7-8% range, when in the industry standards on the bowling, it's typically only around about 4 or 5% of those bowlers. So up to where we are today, we're doing pretty good. So that helps us get an understanding of what we have. And then a little bit further on, we dig down into the market projection, so we kind of know where we're going. We got a number of events on the books. What does that look like? We do know, though, that the number of bowlers, the committed bowlers, are declining anywhere from 4 to 5, 6% a year. So what is that going to look as we go into the future?
Howard, I don't want to interrupt you really quick, but I want to make sure that all the board understands that you're talking about this draft page that was presented to you that has a little bit more detail.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate the chairman. There's a lot of information. We'll be building this all out for each of the segments as we go along. So we got the internal side, and then the external side, the internal side, excuse me, will then be driven by what the external is telling us. So we'll look into you can see the utilization days. How well are we using these facilities? Right? How many empty days? And as we go forward, we know then how that's going to drive the financial performance. So all that's going to roll up for each and every one of our segments inside of the line of businesses, so we can then plan for the line of business. So you'll see there that what we've kind of think with those numbers behind each one of those, we're thinking like with John Linus saying there's somewhere in the neighborhood about 10 market groups inside of there that we want to kind of pay attention to. There's DMAI, the Destination Marketing Association International, designates 30 plus, John, something like that. We don't do well in all those, obviously. We're going to focus on the ones we can impact. So there's about 10. Team sports, team competition, as you well know, that we do pretty well in there. That is part of group sales and so forth, but we're pulling it out because it's a substantial part. And there's a lot of different potentials inside of there. We're looking at maybe 8 different segments inside of there. Livestock, equestrian, 2. Bowling has the big the competitors as well as the smaller ones. Concert and events, we're calling it ticket performances and maybe some professional stuff, and so we're digging into that. And tourism, actually in the tourism side, there probably might be 2 different lines in there. But one that really excites me, because I was in the hospitality business for many years, is understanding where our visitors come from. I mean, isn't that a novel thing? But if we can really get a good handle on where our visitors coming from, we can be a lot more impactful on how we're spending the money and how we can drive more visitors here. And Ms. Cunningham, this is her project, and she has started on this, and we're glad to be able to help her with it.
This is something we actually are really excited about, and it's not been done, but with the help of Richard Wells and Howard and myself, talking about how do we find out where our visitors are coming from. My work with the airport authority has been amazing to give us some of that data, but it doesn't take into account all of the visitors. It doesn't take into account visitors that might be driving here from Portland that happen to be a good base. So the results from the airport show us one picture. We're going back 3 years with our hotel properties. They're providing database information from where their visitors by month have been originate from. information will be going to Howard and his team to consolidate it, and we'll have some very good understanding of where these visitors are coming from. That information on a sidebar will be shared with the airport so they can look at a market like Portland and say, my gosh, we're showing this many people fly from Portland, but it's a pretty robust group that's staying in Reno. So that might help them to go after new service. With that information, we can make some very good decisions. I think one of the most important parts of this plan is how it relates to the marketing spend of these new surcharge dollars. So we'll be able to make some very data-driven decisions. More importantly, after we decide what different destinations to advertise in, we're going to be able to have the ability to measure effectiveness. And if we're doing a campaign in San Diego, perhaps, and we're not seeing that needle move, we can make some really strategic changes in our direction if we want to. But for the first time, we will have real live, solid information. And I'm pleased to report that the hotels that immediately jumped on and said, you bet we'll help you, Atlantis, Circus, Peppermill, Sands Regency, Harrah's, Hyatt Lake Tahoe, El Dorado, Silver Legacy. GSR has verbally said yes. We're just waiting for confirmation, and I'm waiting for confirmation from Carlton Gear. So we are going to have a phenomenal database that will give us some great information as to what markets have a propensity to travel to Reno. That's that part.
Cunningham.
Thank you both so much. So I just want to be sure that we're kind of understanding this slide structurally. The bowling example that you have in front of you that Chairman Lucey had you take out, I want to be clear that we'll be developing one of those for each of the numbers represented on the screen. And I think that's just illustrates essentially how granular we're going with the information we already have on hand. So it's in one hand kind of making it more succinct and digestible, but also being more thorough and granular.
Mr. Farahi.
Yeah, you know, that's great. I love what I see. But what we have is one thing, where the opportunities are. Just because we have a livestock event center, we have a convention center, bowling center, that doesn't mean those are the only areas we should be investing in. We like through this study what we have asked John Cotts to come out, where are the opportunities in the future for this destination that we are not in today. We may have to convert one of these facilities to something totally different. So I, for one, on this board, I'm going to be looking and challenging you guys with John Catt's study to tell us where are the opportunities we should be investing in and what facilities we need to change. So we truly are looking not only at what we have, but where the opportunities are.
To quickly put a little point to that, along with John Leine with what we call the MINT database, it's a consortium of, a repository, I should say, of information from numerous convention bureaus around the United States. We've got past consumption of rooms and events and so forth, and future as well. So we've already started on that. We're looking into potential markets that maybe we aren't even looking at too much. So we get a little bit of an idea of where we are. We've got some calculations on our own little quote market share and stuff like that. So to your point, there's some areas that we've already looked at that there's a big gap, and we don't have a lot going on there. So we will be digging further into that as needed.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say more is that John Cotts is the expert in the field of tourism and that. His study should tell us where nationally, regionally, and where we as a destination have opportunities. If he does not deliver that to us on his report, I for one would be very disappointed. Then once we know where those opportunities are, from external and from internal, then we have to decide how we're going to address those issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's it. Part of that handout that you have we're pulling information on his report and looking for the opportunities. Definitely, we want to look at the market opportunities. And when we don't have all the information, we'll have to go a little bit further.
But again, please, it's his job to have done that research and tell us where national tourism is going, where are the new opportunities. I'm repeating myself, but it's not your job and our job, because his job is as an external research expert in the field to bring us those opportunities.
Thank you, Mr.
I understand.
Farahi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farahi. Mr. Carasali.
Just a quick question, I want to make sure. This is just a template that we're looking at. It's got a lot of information on it, but it truly is incomplete. Will there be a category at the bottom of this thing that says conclusion, where you make an ultimate recommendation on each individual facility based on Mr. Katz's information and then your research, the money end of it, the tourism end of it?
Definitely. You see there's a few at the beginning. This is obviously in process, Mr. McGovern, but there's key observations there, but we will roll those all up into an understandable, kind of picturing almost like a grid of where opportunities are, what kind of effort we might have to put into it. So there's the low-hanging fruit, the more extensive fruit. So yes, there's going to be a lot of this information, but there's a summary for each one of those, and then they'll be brought up together.
So I just want to understand that you will go out on that thin limb and say, hey, you guys shouldn't be in this business. And I'm not specifically talking about bowling. I'm talking about the different facilities that we have and the monies that are spent in those market areas.
So we're going to make those observations and bring it to the board, and obviously we'll take that and vet it and make the final one. But yeah, definitely based upon what we see and hear, there will be thoughts that will summarize and help you to make your better decision. Yes.
Mr. Carasali.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who is going to be in charge of making sure that you combine the market research with what they're doing and getting into the direction or the answer that we want to get to? Is that Mr. Wells that's going to keep them on track and Katz on track to get us to point A?
And Mr. Wells has been very instrumental in making sure that John Kotz and CSNL are staying on. And the dialogue has been very open. And so, but yes, Mr. Wells and myself, I have been intimately involved with this.
I think we ought to make it specific. It's Mr. Wells and you and Ms. Cunningham. You got to
sure. No, absolutely. I think we need to nail down who exactly is going to oversee and make sure that we carry through on the deliverables.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Mavrides.
I have three questions. Looking through the board packet, you talk a little bit about the strategic or the planning process for 16-17. What will your involvement be while you're developing the strategic plan to be working with staff on the 16-17 planning? That's the first question. The second question is in your deliverables. You talk about, under phase 4, you talk about monthly strategic check-ins. How long will that go on for? Does that have a time limit, or is that indefinite? And then the final question is, your contract talks about a not to exceed $158,000. How do we get to 150? Is that hourly and expenses, or what's the metric or the measurable until we get to that limit? Thank you.
Absolutely, and I can actually take those questions in reverse order. So the contract is specifically drafted based on the deliverables seen here. It's basically priced per plan. So if we feel that's outside of the budget or what we're willing to continue investing, it's a matter of taking one of these plans out, one of these lines of business plans out. That's the first question. The second question about the process, what we normally like to do when working with clients is basically getting through a quarterly strategy review. So again, I revisit the scope of work to speak specifically what this is about, but when we're talking about phase 4, we're talking about through the end of the year, so through the balance of 2016. Your first question I'll address in a minute when we get to the actual process, if that's okay. I want to make sure we have landed all the questions regarding the market research.
Okay. Mr. Carasali.
Based on what I'm hearing, I would support a motion that would repeat the recommendation here on the bottom of whatever, it is a recommendation of Chair Lucey, et cetera. If everybody's so inclined, I think that would make sense.
Mr. Farahi.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. What is your timetable again?
It's on
So if you're looking in the white binder in front of you, about halfway through, there's a tab that says strategic plan.
It's John.
It's bolded, I'd say right about halfway through. The second page within that tab is specifically the detailed process outline.
No.
Okay, so just tell me the timetable, please.
Sure, absolutely, and I can actually jump to that. The last thing I want to just touch on, and I was holding comment until we were moving forward, is with the punch list that Chairman Lucey called out that we have delivered to John Kotz, we specifically asked for him to expand with more kind of a data-driven understanding behind specifically his recommendations to drive visitors to the Reno-Tahoe area. So that's a piece that has been addressed, but we're digging into further. So jumping to the process where I think all of our minds are going, and let's take a minute, make sure that we all feel comfortable with how this is set up and why, what we can expect. So this is a really high-level outline. It's essentially communicating the same thing, Mr. Farahi, that I just directed you to. So again, strategic planning tab, page 2. But basically, what we've done is that we've designed a process where we'll be building both the strategic plan and the operational plan simultaneously. And so back to the previous question, the involvement of the board will be on the strategic planning side, and the involvement of the staff will be specifically on the operational side. Of course, there's some overlap there, but that's more or less how we're kind of breaking out the collaboration. So we're essentially running 2 entirely different planning processes in tandem. I'll speak to the operational component secondly, so I will get to that question. But the reason that we're doing it this way is because we know we have some immovable deadlines. We're waiting to understand or decide how we should use the surcharge fund. We know that we need to approve the FY16-17 budget. And so pending some of those decisions, we're wanting to start kind of making progress on each of these at the same time. So we're committing to hitting these deadlines that you see here. And we've designed this process this way to make it as informative as possible so we can review all of the data that we have and that we're working so hard to synthesize. But so we can also kind of digest it over some period of time. So when we get together at the board retreat, we have the ability to have strategic discussion around it and make those hard decisions rather than spending all of the time reviewing the data. So this process is basically broken down into monthly intervals, which is what we're seeing specific to the strategic planning side. We're essentially kicking that off today by passing out these binders and introducing ourselves. In February, we would continue on by presenting the first 3 of 7 lines of business. So the example that you see there with bowling, we would have one of those for each of 3 lines of business. In March, we would do that once again, so for the second set of 3 of those 7 lines of business, and then in April is when we'd be able to address the marketing portion of the plan, specifically the visitor origination assessment. So that's basically our timeline to get us through kind of the data chunks of digesting what we need to know as a board to make these educated decisions. And then the board retreat, pending the date that we pick, either in May or June, will be to make those decisions and then move forward with finalizing a plan come the end of the fiscal year. So that's the timeline on the strategic plan side. On the operational plan side, question? I have one question. Go ahead. Cool. Thank you. So on the operational plan side, we're kicking this off next week. And the way that that process will run is that we'll be asking the board for a preliminary set of goals and KPIs by line of business. And we're essentially giving the direction that this is creating goals as is. So a status quo understanding of what we can reasonably expect in FY16-17. There will then be 2 iterations of revisions to those goals. The first iteration will happen after we have the preliminary budget review. So we have the direction of kind of where our spend is going. The second iteration will happen after the strategic plan has been approved, and that will specifically be to align the goals back to the direction set forth in the strategic plan. So I hope that answers your question regarding how that operational flow will happen.
I'd like to make a few comments. I'm new to this board. I did sit through some meetings before I was put on the board, and my understanding was that John Kotz was hired to prepare a strategic plan. Now we're getting research. I'm not sure how that happened, how the contract was reviewed, what the vetting process was, but I think this board's role is oversight and accountability, and I'm a little confused as to how we got here. The good news is I think these folks have a real good, solid approach. It's something that we were formerly with MGM. We used a similar approach for strategic planning. So I think we're on the right track finally. I hope that we have a good review of their contract to make sure we get the deliverables and we have some accountability built into that contract to make sure that the outcomes that we hope and expect to get are what we get on the timelines that we get them. And finally, I echo Mr. Farahi's comments about each of those areas should have a component about new opportunities or areas that we're not addressing, or maybe areas that we could be looking at for new business in addition to traditional type business that we've been getting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mavrides. Any other discussion at this time? Chelsea?
Perfect. So, just to kind of wrap this up, the net of all of it, and especially if you've been through a process similar to this, is we're essentially taking what is a normally a linear sequence and kind of folding it back on itself to expedite the process and make sure that we can hit the ground running come the start of the fiscal year with the direction of the strategic plan and start driving accountability throughout the RSCVA. So just to speak a bit more administratively for a second to land this point, the binders that you have in front of you are specifically what we'll use to progressively populate the strategic plan. So again, as mentioned, we kind of started that today with building out the first section, some background on the RSCVA as an organization. The bulk of the midsection will be the data that's been delivered by John Kotz. And then essentially everything that you see after what is called Destination Assessment, CS&L, is what we're taking on. It's outlined in the strategic planning tab, but those are the sections that we are responsible for from a deliverable perspective and process perspective.
All right.
Okay. Last but not least, again, just to wrap us up, and then I'll pass it back to Chairman Lucey. We do this with every client that we work with. It's something that we take really seriously to ground ourselves with why we're leading this process, how we're leading this process. And so we've framed some guiding principles to ensure that we're successful over the next couple of months. Just to kind of call out, what's really important about this is we're using a phased approach specifically so that we can focus on what is urgent and important. And at the end of the day, what we're holding ourselves accountable to is creating an executable plan that we can drive accountability against. So that's kind of the mantra moving forward, and we take that really seriously. So, again, just to leave you, this is your information, this is your process, this will be your plan. And so we welcome any and all feedback throughout the process. We'll be seeing you on a monthly basis. We'll also be communicating with you via Chairman Lucey and Jennifer. They'll be sending out bi-monthly updates, basically, that we'll be inserting information into. And we have one more question.
Mr. Farahi?
No, once she's gone.
Oh, okay. No.
That's really it. I know the next piece is to talk specifically about the investment, so I'll wrap up there.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Vores. So I just want to wrap up really quick, and then we'll have some discussion in regards to the whole process. This obviously has been a very tumultuous process for us to date. And when we look at a number of $158,000 in addition to what we've spent, it is definitely a mouthful to swallow. And it's difficult when you see that number, but the way I want to make sure that everybody approaches this and looks at this is that for that surcharge over the next 5 years, there'll be $21 million accessible. And that plan, whatever we put forth, will provide direction to our executive team and future CEO and how we spend that money. That money needs to be spent in the most opportune way. We sit in a ripe opportunity to capture new business, to focus on what we're doing. And now with the addition of Erica Olson and On Strategy and her team, in conjunction with John Kotz and CS&L and the data that they have provided as market experts, this is something that we need to carry forward. It is imperative for us to take forth this effort to make sure that this is done right, and that we have a strategic retreat that's worth our time and energy. So with that, I'll leave that up for discussion. Mr. Lawson.
It's been hard for me to sit here and be quiet, but the old Ron White saying, I have the right to remain silent, but I don't have the ability. In this particular case, I'm frustrated beyond all doubt here. I mean, we have a consultant to find a consultant. Now we have to have a consultant to finish a consultant's job. Personally, if this was my business, there'd be heads rolling. And I understand what you said, and I understand we have to finish this. But it's where we are, where we've gotten to, is embarrassing. It's embarrassing to me. So I don't want this. I want this contract reviewed very, very well, and I assume you will, that there will be a statement in there that says they're going to provide a strategic plan in each area, so that we don't fall into the same trap again. We thought we were getting a strategic plan for Mr. Kotz. We didn't get one. He's unable to finish the job. He didn't have the qualifications to do the job. So I want to make sure that this money is well spent, that we come up with what we need to move forward down the road. I also think that we should go back and look to the first two consultants to reimburse us some money, because they didn't perform their jobs. So that's my 2 cents worth, and have it for whatever it's worth.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Farahi.
Mr. Lawson, let me tell you, as somebody who's in the business and in tourism business and that, we have done these studies for this organization for over 40 years that I've been in this community. Doing a study that John Kotz has done and what these guys are going to do are two different things. John Kotz has done a study which is imperative on strategy. Will never be able to put a 5-year strategic plan in place without John Kotz study. What John Kotz did not deliver, which maybe we should not have expected him to be able to deliver, his job was not to put a strategic plan per se of 5 years telling us what to do, how to do it and that, but to give us the information where the opportunities are, what the tourism industry does and that. And I have to tell you, I give the credit to Richard Wells, and I want to thank him publicly for saying, you know, you're getting a study again, like you've been getting for the last 40 years that I know, and tied to that study, there is not a strategic plan. These are two different things. So Richard brought up that, you know, we are not going to get the job done right if we stop here. John Kotz can do it. Now we got to put it in a format that we can turn it into a strategic plan. So I don't think there has been any waste of time. I don't feel there's been any waste of resources. As a matter of fact, maybe this is finally the year that we're going to get a truly strategic plan for this organization. And I'm excited about it. I'm very excited. So I want to say what Tony said, that this is the road, the track we are in. We are on the right track. And this time, God willing, we're going to get it done, because it's not the $158,000 more that we're going to spend. Is what we don't spend at the cost to this organization, this community, community, for not doing it right. So I think the money is well spent, and we should get the job done.
Mr. Findlen.
Thank you. You know, I've been involved with this process from the beginning, and honestly, I'm disappointed as well as to where we are today in the process. It certainly wasn't the intent from the beginning. We thought that we had a consultant that would take this through the finish, and you know, obviously that hasn't happened. Having said that, I applaud really this direction. I think your presentation was great. I think it's the necessary thing for this organization to do at this time. It's unfortunate that we are where we are, but we are, and we need to nail it for the future of this organization. So yes, disappointed, but to John's point, excited to see that we've got some informational background now, and hopefully we'll execute this plan moving forward. So.
Thank you, Mr. Findlen. Mr. Carasali.
I'd like to make a motion again, based on the recommendation by Jennifer Cunningham, with the addition that Mr. Lucey, Richard Wells, and Jennifer Cunningham will be the three people that will make it all come together with the information that this report will bring along with John Katz's, and they'll be the ones that keep it going in the right direction. So that is my motion.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Carasali. I have a motion from Mr. Carasali. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second from Mr. Farahi. All those in favor? signify by-
Questions on the motion?
Oh, Mr. McGovern.
Can I ask, financially, where are we with Mr. Kotz? Has he received 100% of his payment?
To date, right now, and I can answer that for you, Mr. McGovern. To date, he's been paid $109,000, and I asked this of staff. $109,000 he's been currently paid out of the $171,500 that he's been promised. He currently has 2 outstanding invoices with us, the total of $25,000 for October and November services. He has been working with us in the months of December and January, so we expect to probably be invoiced again. So by the time we see those invoices, we'll be fairly close to that 171.
I guess my comment, more than anything, is pretty much in line with Mr. Lawson. First, let me say that where I think we are right now, we're going in the right direction. But I'm pretty disappointed in Mr. Kotz also. I think as a group, there isn't anybody that was part of the vetting process that didn't expect a 5-year plan out of him. We absolutely, time after time after time, and if you look at his contract, expected that. I'm not willing, as one, to turn my back on a $175,000 contract where performance wasn't given. That's unacceptable. We're not doing our job if we let him skate, and I'll use that word, and pay him $175,000 to walk away with an incomplete, and then thank him for the job he did. I think this board needs to take action one way or another, as Mr. Lawson said, to get a refund or to cancel the contract where it is right now. Do we still need, knowing that we're not going to get what we contracted for, do we need to continue with input from him?
Sure.
Mr. Farahi.
I think you had mentioned that you're sending a list of things that are not completed that we need to have before we accept the report complete. Is that the case?
That's correct. We have submitted that punch list to Mr. Kotz and CSNL for the information that's still needed today.
I don't think we should be paying till we get all that information.
And I've instructed Mr. Rivers, and I told him that we need to potentially hold on those until the board had time to discuss that, and I think that's so I believe that would probably be direction that we could give Mr. Rivers in regards to Mr. Kotz's contract. But right now, since that is not on the agenda, we need to stick to just...
No, I believe it is on the agenda. We're talking about the strategic plan.
Well...
So as part of the agenda item, we have revising the CSNL scope of work, and I think I can answer some of your questions. The CSNL contract is billed on a percentage complete basis. And I think when we went through the process of vetting and ultimately retaining CSNL, it was the understanding that they would produce a 5-year strategic plan. I believe, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, that CSNL, the issue here is that they would provide a strategic plan, but our board is saying that strategic plan isn't what we really want. And so at this point, we can revise their scope of work with CSNL, assuming they agree, to cooperate with getting us this information to allow On Strategy to take over and produce the final plan. We can terminate on a 30-day notice with CSNL, where we can terminate that contract. We have to give them 30 days notice, but we could tell them to stop work and deal with going forward how we settle up with CSNL. Or we can ask that they kind of be a part of this process and help us transition.
So my one question would be, on the list of deliverables that we are still due from CSL, are there items that we need to move forward with that we haven't gotten yet?
Yes.
There are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any further discussion at this time? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So if I can.
Mr. Kennedy.
So the motion we have is to move forward with on strategy to kind of revise the CSNL scope of work going forward, but also like to see if we can take action authorizing Ms. Cunningham to execute the on strategy contract based on the terms and conditions that have been presented today, subject to final review and negotiation.
Absolutely, that was my understanding of the motion.
And I would like to add that, as far as I'm concerned, John Cutts does not get another penny till the report is completed based on the questions that we have asked for him to complete. I would like to make that part of the motion.
Okay. Yeah, we already had a vote, so we'd have to take another motion. We'd have to have if that would be in a form of motion? Okay, anyone second that motion? Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? So, Mrs. Cunningham, does that provide you clear and concise direction?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Mr. Mavrides.
Who will be reviewing the new contract with the new consultant to make sure that it's bulletproof, that we have deliverables and timelines clearly outlined, linked to payment?
We're just going to give it to On Strategy and let them do it themselves. The new direction that we are going to go is going to be reviewed by Richard Wells, Jennifer Cunningham, myself, and Brian Kennedy, and Brian Kennedy. Ben Kennedy, Brian. Sorry, it's been a long morning already. So the four of us will be reviewing the contract in its entirety and make sure that it covers all the deliverables and the scope of work that's been presented here today. So, all right. Seeing no other comment or discussion in regards to this matter, we're going to close item number 3 and move on to number 4, CEO search update. So, Mr. Kennedy.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. So the CEO search committee had its first meeting December 17th. At that meeting, we discussed the draft RFQ and existing job description. Based on that meeting, we've revised the RFQ. We have revised the draft job description. We've issued the RFQ. The RFQ went out first part of January. Responses to that RFQ are due, I believe, February 3rd. Once we receive those responses, we'll distribute them to the CEO search committee. They'll go through, review them. We'll take some direction from Chairman Lucey as far as once they narrow down that field of candidates for the search firm to bring that to the board for the board to make a final approval. We'll then retain the search firm and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And do we have any applicants to date?
We have no responses to the RFQ to date.
As of today. All right. This is not an action item. Is there any discussion in regards to this? All right. Seeing none, moving forward. Well, presentations from the RSCVA staff, Executive Office, Marketing, Sales, and Facilities and Finance.
We've purposely kept this report brief because we have such a full agenda. First, I'd like to welcome Kevin Winters, and hopefully, Bill, you'll make it through the vote at the end of the meeting. What we've put together for our new members, but also our existing members, Chelsea referenced our board orientation and strategic plan. Our onboarding with our board members has sort of, I think it's lacked a little bit of comprehensive overview. And so what we've done is put together a very top-level overview of our organization, the statutes that formed us, who the executive staff is, who your peer board members are, and individual 1-page to 2-page sheets from each department, kind of highlighting what it is that we do, as well as a facility overview and financial information. So I hope you find this useful. I'm sure we'll be, as we move on with our strategic plan, we'll be bringing on 3-inch binders and filling up all of the tabs. We included that, though, to really give you an idea of the extent of our preparation with on strategy, what's coming down the pike. With that, though, I would like to ask Kevin and Bill, if you would like to do one-on-ones with our executive staff to learn more about what we do, or any of the board members, contact us. This is just a top-level overview, and at your convenience, contact us. We'll have a photographer here next week, next month prior to the board meeting. If anybody wants new photographs taken for their RSCVA page, feel free to join us, but both Kevin and Bill will join us on that. I don't have to touch on the strategic plan that you guys are very familiar at this point now, what we're working on. In terms of the marketing area, our big focus was the RFQ process for an integrated marketing firm. As you know, we did pull a panel together to review the proposals from the RFQ. We had 16, we sent out over 250 invitations to submit a proposal for our RFQ. It was a national approach. We did receive 16 RFQs. The presentations were sent to the panel members last week, or the week before last, to review independently with some recommendations from our staff as to what areas to consider. Demonstrated capabilities and work history with convention authorities, other tourism clients, convention clients, expertise in digital marketing, availability of personnel. So the panel went through and individually scored all of the 16 proposals. They sent their individual scoring sheets to the marketing department. We accumulated and combined all of the scores, and there was a ranking of the 16 applicants. There was a decision made by that panel to bring back 4 companies to do presentations. And in the meantime, and that was just last week, in the meantime, I've gotten feedback from some of the board members that they're very interested in hearing the presentations and augmenting that, making it a little bit larger of a group to come present. The suggestion was to bring the top 8 companies that placed to do an all-day presentation back to back to back, where the board could sit in and see the presentations and help weigh in on that decision. Chairman Lucey has had discussions with me that what we'd like to do is call a special board meeting March 3rd, 4th, or 5th to gather and listen to the presentations. And I'd like to turn it over to Chair Lucey if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. At this time, and this goes back to, this kind of weaves itself into all the conversations we've had thus far this morning. With the strategic plan, the money that we're spending as we move forward with this RFQ, and the subcommittees, I feel it's important that all of the board has input in regards to the qualifications of the new marketing firm, because this new firm is going to be the ones that are going to brand who we are as the RSCVA. This is going to be someone who takes our new direction for our ad buys and lead on our development of who. And so for us to have a subcommittee and a sub-panel just decide on behalf of the board, I think it's more prevalent for the board members currently, since we do not have the direction of a CEO, to have input through a special board meeting to hear these proposals from the top 8 of the proponent from the subcommittee, and then make the decisions there for us to put forth to the marketing department. Mr. Farahi.
Chair, I would like to have homework be done before that meeting, because if not, just on an interview, if you have somebody slick standing there and making a presentation, at least for me, I will not be able to make a decision. I like to look at track record. I like to have the staff done your homework to tell us each one of these firms that are coming to make presentation to us, What is their track record? Where they have worked? Have you checked with that destination that they have worked with? What is the executive director of that station says pro and con? So to me, it's much more important the track record than an interview.
Thank you, Mr. Farahi. Any other discussion at this time?
We will be providing all of the board members with packets, the proposals from all 8
In advance.
companies well in advance. And I do need to draw to your attention that there was a tie for place number 8, so we may be talking about 9 people.
That's fine. I think the larger the group, the more diverse that we can just look at and pick from, it's better for us.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said fully, Jennifer. How are you going to check their background? Who's going to be doing it? How are you going to be doing it? So when we get a packet from you, we know we have some accurate information in that packet.
I'm happy to have our staff do it and the experts in the area, so our digital person can check facts on digital background. Social person can give us information on how their media is being followed. And I'm more than happy to call their references and their case studies on who they've worked with in the past, whether they're references or not. So our staff will vet them and give sheet, I guess, on top of each one with our impressions, with our information that we've
And
gathered.
I do not like to see only positive. That when the staff, your recommendation come, pro and con, please, on each one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Mr. Kennedy.
And I just want to make a statement, just to clarify the record. We've made reference to the subcommittee that's helped vet the RFQs. That's not a committee of this board. It has no board member involvement. It's a committee of experts in the field that have advised Ms. Cunningham in helping her form her opinion and recommendation to the board. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, next on our list, I'll turn it over to John Leinen.
Good morning, everybody. First, we're going to talk about some of our top priorities in the sales area. We've got some tactical things that I'm very excited about and that are going to help us really continue to educate our brand awareness within the meetings market. First and foremost is the DC sales mission, which will be the week of April 5 to 7. We have 4 hotel partners that are with us on this sales mission. The reason why we're putting a lot of emphasis on the DC sales mission is that's where our richest and densest population base of customers are. The DC area represents well over 20% of our typical production, as well as over 20% of our account base. Over that dates of April 5 to 7, we're targeting to reach over 125 customers in that 3-day period, with a stretch goal of trying to reach 175. We have some very exciting, creative customer events to help try to attract those touch points, as well as an education session that the customers can get CEUs for. In addition to our DC sales mission, we have some upcoming FAM trips that will bring customers out here. We have a group FAM February 25 to 28. We're expecting to bring about 15 to 20 customers out here. We're very excited about some of the advanced list of who's going to be here. And then also on the tourism side, we have a ski FAM that's bringing in a blend of 60 wholesalers, travel agents, and OTAs here. It's a big number that will bring great exposure, and that's over the dates of March 9 to 13.
Okay. Did you have more? No, we'll jump over that.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief in my remarks. First, we've outlined the margins for each facility after the first 6 months. The actual details contained within your board packet each month. Excuse me. But we just wanted to go ahead and bring out the 6 months where we are to date. USBC starts March 5th, goes through July 11th, right at about 8,000 teams at this point. And in addition to all the other things, CEO search firm, strategic plan, and so forth we've talked about, in working with Brian and Mr. Kennedy, we do intend at the February 17th Finance Committee meeting to bring forward some recommendations on the future of Wild Creek Golf Course. So,
Mr. Farahi.
Is this really going to happen?
we're prepared to bring forward, yes, sir, if y'all are prepared to take it on.
Mayor Schieve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Lyon, can you just give me a little bit of background on who our representative is in Washington, D.C.? I was just at the LVCVA in Washington, D.C., and just curious if it offers an opportunity for us to sort of maybe piggyback off of them. They even have space in that location. It's impressive what they've done there, and I really think that, you know, Reno, we can always kind of learn from what they're doing, and just curious to know what we have in store for our DC representative.
We actually have two persons based in Washington, D.C., Jennifer Bumbleau and Jennifer Abdenor, and they're outstanding, very well respected. Our activities are, one, through our ASAE strategic partnership. We're utilizing their conference center and building a on-branded experience in the ASA building and bringing customers to ASAE to get a total immersion of what's happening in the destination. It's a very unique approach. It's one that most destinations are not doing. Typically, the destination or our NSO may take our hotel partners into their office. Instead, we're taking the customer out of their office and giving them a branded experience, talking about all the economic development, the outdoor lifestyle, everything that's happening in this destination and why they should consider us for one of their futures. In addition to, we have evening activities. One is centered around a bowling and bocce ball place, high-end, very, very cool. The other one's an escape room. And these are to bring customers together for fun activities. That's a common way that CVBs and NSOs will integrate with our customers. And then also potentially, if it works out, and we're hopefully here in the next week or two, we'll be having a suite at the Nats game and bringing customers entertained there, as well as having a 2-hour education session where they can get continuing education units.
My question is too, do they have a relationship with the LVCVA there? Do they work in conjunction with them? I think it's really something that we should take advantage of. We have it at our fingertips, so I'm just curious how much they interact with them in DC. Do you have any idea?
Well, I know they have a relationship with them as far as that interaction and on customer engagement. Probably we haven't seen that. And many times I think we may sometimes see each other as a competitor.
Yeah, and yeah.
You know, but if there's an opportunity there,
yeah.
Certainly we can explore that.
I think there is. I just will tell you, I got the sense they had a very nice welcoming for Mayor Goodman and myself, and for different elected officials that came, and there was a little bit of talk that they were disappointed that Reno was not in the room. And so I just think it's an opportunity for us to really build upon that relationship. So I was just sort of curious who's there and sort of managing that. But we can certainly talk about how we can work with them in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Rivers.
Thank you. As has been mentioned, we are working on the budget for 16-17. That's kind of the priority right now. Also, we are working on the fiscal 15-16 year. We have a pretty significant surplus, north of $1.5 million, that we are working on a anticipated spending plan that we're looking at bringing forward next month as well. That is not surcharge dollars, that is the operating budget, largely driven by increases in ADR that have been seen throughout the year. We're also working on an RFQ for legal and governmental affairs as directed by the chair. And with that, I'll keep my remarks short.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. And I would share Mayor Schieve's comment, Mr. Leinen. I think that, as we go forward, we have this board and our executive team, I know, has dramatically tried to improve our relationships with Las Vegas and continue to do so. And as Mr. Farahi, we're not a mini Las Vegas. We're not in competition with Las Vegas. We're two different animals completely. There's no reason that we can't work together as a unified group. And I think Mark Hutchinson, our Lieutenant Governor, has continued to say that, the One Nevada, we're working on it from the county and cities points, kind of a one region idea. So we want to maintain that kind of momentum as we move forward. So I would really urge the executive team to reach out to the counterparts in the LVCVA and start developing those relationships and continue to nurture those as we move forward. So,
thank you.
Any other further discussion on this matter? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Cunningham, do you have anything else?
I just want to bring up, I'm not going to go over the successes, you can read that, but critical issues and challenges. It's my intention never to have the board surprised about anything. And we have a Big Sky basketball tournament coming up in 6 weeks, and it's a considerable investment from this organization. So I've asked Mr. Leinen to, for the next few board meetings, to give you an update. And you have my word that right after the tournament's over, we'll follow up with a post-analysis. So with that, John Leinen.
Yeah, the Big Sky Tournament is very exciting. It's going to be here the week of March 7 to 12. This is the first time the Big Sky has taken this event to a neutral site, and it's the first time that they will have a destination or a site that they can pre-market and advertise. Typically in the past, this tournament, the location's been made 10 days out, and then they've moved en masse. Some of the opportunities that we're looking at are, one, we'll have 22 teams. This is also the first time that every team who is competing in the Big Sky basketball tournament will be at the tournament. In the past, it's been 22 teams, meaning men's and women's, 12 colleges from each division there. So what we need to do to be successful, one is build the revenues that are coming from the guest rooms usage. We have the teams are going to be housed at the Silver Legacy and the El Dorado. There's a revenue stream that we anticipate from there. And then there's also other support rooms from the Circus. Our budget was built on the revenues from those teams based on room tax as well as subsidies coming in from the hotels. Then we need to realize the ticket sales to help achieve our budget goals. Over 22 games, we need to realize about on average, just multiplying it out, about 500 fans per game to make a break-even opportunity. I think that's a doable reach. Other people may think that we may be up for a loss here, but you know, we have to go after this really hard. We've got a very strong marketing plan, working with both Big Sky as well as Abbey Agency. That marketing plan just kicked off last weekend. We'll be in-game promotions at 8 different games over the course of the next few weeks. We also have about $20,000 in a media plan, both centered on locally to drive the attendance from our region, as well as the outreach to the colleges that will be competing here. We have plans to reach into their booster club. Not only when we have those in-game presentations, we're also presenting to the booster clubs at those colleges. So all in, the total expenses are about $427,000 is what we outlined. In there is paying ourselves back a facility rental, about $67,000 built into that budget that we would pay back from this event to our facility. Revenues, quote unquote guaranteed, that being the teams staying in our rooms, that being the subsidies that we get from our participants, that being the room tax that's coming in. Right now, that's probably about $183,000. So our exposure is $244,000. Again, to break even, we have to sell 11,000 tickets. Historically, it's hard to compare apples to apples. They don't have ticket sales they can give us. They have ticket revenue. But if we take the ticket revenue divided by how much our tickets are selling right now, which we sold about 200 tickets so far at about roughly $21. They would have sold 8,750 last year in Missoula. In 2014, they would have sold 7,000. In 2013, they would have sold 9,450. But their ticket revenue was 189,000 in 13, 140,000 in 14, 175,000 in 15. So we're watching it, we're tracking it, we're monitoring it, and as Jennifer said, we'll report back on a frequent basis.
Mr. Carasali.
Leinen, I understand when we signed the contract for room nights, it was 5,000 room nights a year per tournament for 3 years. Is that correct?
No, not that amount. It was 2,500 room nights per year.
It was?
2,500, and that was just for team
So
use.
it's 20. In other words, we anticipated 2,500 room nights this year, and then the ongoing
2,500 per year.
How are we doing with the room nights?
Well, right now, I don't have the team blocks, but one of our hotels is reporting right now.
Aren't most of the team blocks comped?
No.
No?
They're paid.
All right.
They're all paid. fan blocks so far pick up from reporting of one hotel is 150 room nights. So now, again, keep in mind, they've never been able to pre-promote. So what we don't know is this incremental? Or is this going to be just what they naturally pick up? In the past, they've had 10 days and moved attendance of almost 10,000 people into a city without any pre-promotion.
So you'll keep us abreast at the end of the
Yes, sir.
tournament how we did?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Carasali, you are correct. In the past, the WAC tournaments used to always be conference, but this year we're not.
What about the auxiliary people like cheerleaders?
Those are paid for. That was not in some of that tracking. So we have some incremental revenues that aren't in our revenue budget, that being the cheer, the bands, the fan blocks are not in our revenue. Anything related to food and beverage, parking in our facilities are not in our revenue projections. How many room nights are we comping? I don't think we're comping any. You know, from what the way it was laid out, the teams will be paying for all of their room stays. Now, the hotels may have had some one-off comp allocations to the coaches or whatever, but I'm not privy to what the contracts were at the hotel level.
Thank you, Mr. Carasali. Any other further discussion? I would just give some further direction to you, Mr. Leinen. Coming forward in the February and March meetings, I'd like to have a detailed outline in regards to the Big Sky, what our deliverables are, so that every board member has a clear understanding, especially for the 2 board members that will be coming on, so that we have some indicators of where we know where we're going with this tournament and how we want to proceed going forward into the future. The other thing I'd like to bring, what is our commitment to Big Sky? We have a dollar amount commitment to Big Sky that was in the contract.
Yes, there's a 2-part commitment, their commitment and our commitment. Our commitment to them was a guarantee of $150,000. Their commitment to us was about $111,000 in ticket sales.
Right.
So the net effect is
32-some thousand.
Yeah.
So if we don't realize the ticket sales, which we anticipate, and hopefully we will, right? At this point, we need to maintain an optimistic understanding, and I hope it does well. But we need to be also cautious and make sure that finance and Mr. Rivers has stockpiled or earmarked some money set aside for a contingency of that. So I'd like to bring that forth at the next board meeting for further discussion for mitigation of any damages we may occur from Big Sky.
Yeah, and we've had those internal discussions, and we're in agreement that we want to do that. We're not in agreement on what that stockpile is.
Okay, just so we can have that discussion at a further time and date. So thank you. All right.
That concludes our report.
Thank you. That's it? All right, thank you. All right, so now we have completed all of the presentations. We are now on to staff reports, marketing, sales, and division. So 2016 Special Event Partnership Funding. This is Mrs. Cunningham, your department. So I'll let you take this away.
All right. I'd like to call up Nina Brown, who handles our special events division of one in the marketing department, and she oversees the whole special event funding process. Nina?
Before I start, I would like to acknowledge a couple of special event representatives that are in the audience. Pete Copeland is the Executive Director of the Great Reno Balloon Race, and Chris Hoff is the Executive Director of Barracuda Championship, and Andrea Curez, and I apologize if I butchered your last name, is the Director of Marketing for the Barracuda. The staff report in front of you for the 2016 Special Event Partnership Funding details the consensus award recommendations that were made by an independent advisory panel who evaluated applications December of 2015. In the interest of time, I'm going to defer to that report for any specifics about the process. The funding budget is currently $265,000. But in November of 2015, the board extended flexibility to the advisory panel through staff to make recommendations that were greater than the current budget due to the increased number of applications that were received. The advisory panel was instructed to make 2 consensus funding recommendations. The first would be recommendations based on the current $265,000 funding budget, and the second recommendation was to make consensus supplemental recommendations if warranted, assuming a potential budget increase. Consequently, the panel recommended an additional $85,000 in funding awards in addition to the $265,000 budget, totaling $350,000 in recommendations. However, a notable development took place in January after the panel met. An agreement was reached between the RSCVA and Hot August Nights concerning a facility rental discount. Subsequently, Hot August Nights relinquished their $40,000 award recommendation back to the RSCVA. That's why the adjusted allocation amount now totals $310,000 rather than the panel's original $350,000. It basically represents a recommendation by the panel to add $45,000 to the current $265,000 budget. So this report requests board approval of the special event funding distribution as recommended by the advisory panel, totaling $310,000. The recommendation allocations include $230,000 in the primary award distributions, as well as an additional $80,000 in the supplemental award distributions. And Chairman Lucey, do you have anything to add about the panel's consensus recommendations?
I would like to just make one quick comment. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Board member Mr. McGovern and I both got the opportunity to sit on this board, and it was a very functional and very thought out and well processed day that we spent going through and vetting all of these different applicants. And when you look at the $1 million ask that was out there roughly, this was a very difficult thing, so we had to spend a lot of time, and we went through industry experts. We talked to a number of different people, and like I said, I think Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Cunningham ran a phenomenal process. These events are really what drive people to our area, and we need to continue to help and support those events and continue to nourish. It's part of the quality of life that people expect when they live here in Reno, but also people that are visiting the area to share with other people as well. So these events, you know, and we can't disregard the events that have been established here for many, many years. Hot August Nights, the national championship air races, the hot air balloon races. There's a number of different legacy events that we have. Even the Barracuda Championship, being relatively new, is still in our minds something that gives us national media exposure, and we get quite a bit of attention from. So we need to continue to nourish the events that we have and continue to promote the ones we don't. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mrs. Brown.
Basically just waiting for board approval
Okay.
of the recommendations that the panel made.
Open for discussion. Mayor Schieve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just really quickly, and I don't know if you know this number, but what typically a convention and visitors bureau our size, what do others, how much do they allocate typically? I mean, how do we figure out what the exact amount is that we're going to allocate? I don't know where we can.
Mrs. Cunningham, do you
So
have?
how do we figure out these numbers?
It's a moving target, and each bureau, many are not involved in special event support. Some are. Las Vegas, I believe they take a couple $1 million and set it aside kind of with a subsidiary organization to allocate funding. The way we got to 250 is for a long time we were operating about 170,000. What was it?
197.5.
197.5.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like that's awfully low
It's extremely low.
compared to what we generate in with some of these events. I mean, you could get a room to save your soul at Santa Crawl, right?
Right.
And things like this. I mean, I want to know, do we have an analysis, a financial analysis of really what these special events bring in to, these room nights. I mean, I would love to, do you have an idea?
Mayor Schieve, the issue is this organization gets them started on that, but we would love them to become independent and self-supporting. Because if not, if we keep feeding them dollars, they get hooked on it, so if we really need to do something to support them because there is a great need there, then we should do it. If not, our goal should always be for them to become independent and self-supporting.
If I may interject with that, what we've done with the process and how we've retooled it, Mr. Farahi, is to prevent that, and so we tie it to incremental business. So, for example, we give balloon races money. We expect that money, and we measure it, and we follow up on it, to be used to generate additional participation in their event. And there's a lot of back and forth in terms of making sure our dollars allocated bring in more visitors. We were at 197.5, and then we went up to 250 a couple of years ago. And at the last, prior to going into this funding cycle, Mr. Mavrides suggested just use, don't have a cap on your funding, and let's see what happens. And so I think that 350,000, it was nice to have that freedom to look at the events and then go back and say, well, if we had unlimited money, where would we plug it in? And being very conscientious and fiscally responsible. And that's kind of where we've gotten to that point, but we can look into other destinations.
I think sometimes they can be a slippery slope. There are certain events that because we didn't fund them, I mean, there have been talk of Burning Man leaving and things like that, and economically they bring, huge dollars to this region. But, it's a slippery slope, because then what you do too, and I get the argument, certainly, Mr. Farahi, but, you fund one and then everyone starts to come out, and so that becomes sort of tricky. I just think we are known as one of the events capitals. When I was in DC, I heard that constantly, and not to mention, like, let's say Art Town. Art Town is really great all month long, but I'm not so sure without more funding can they expand to be like a South by Southwest. And they get very minimal funding. What they've been, I would say in the last couple of years, it's changed dramatically. The demographic has changed dramatically. And certainly new events wanting to sort of start up here in Reno. I think we also have to be aware that, if you give them $10,000, what kind of impact is that going to make? But again, to your point, Mr. Farahi, track record and things like that. I just want this board to be aware of how critical these special events are. And I think, if anything, we have to continue to focus on them. And I know that some of these events get, a bad rap, but I got to tell you, with some of those crawls, it is unbelievable what it generates. Certainly for the millennials, which is certainly a focus for us. And so I just want to be careful that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, because I think a lot of times we can waste money on other things when we really should have been focusing on some of these people that are putting on some great events.
Well said. And to your point, Art Town is going through a little bit of some morphing and change, and it's really exciting to see a more youthful approach. So that was nice.
And if I may add, in 2011, the program was changed from more of a grant-based program to a partnership-based program. In other words, it's not entirely based on need, it's based on opportunities. So what the funding does is provide an opportunity to potential events to broaden their marketing scope that they would not be able to do without funding. In turn, we hope that then it will generate incremental new visitors to the destination. In exchange, the RSCVA receives some return on investment in opportunities that we can then broaden our own marketing messaging by utilizing what the event might already have in assets and tagging onto that. That gives us our specific organization messaging opportunities through them. So it's not just about room nights, it's about marketing opportunities for the RSCVA as well.
Mr. Mavrides.
A couple housekeeping questions. The first is, what was the value given to Hot August Nights in exchange for the $40,000 funding reduction request? And just curious how we got to our numbers for the air races. It's by far the largest beneficiary. Are those incremental room nights we're expecting, or incremental business? Or, and I know there's another component for possible presenting sponsor for NBC Sports. So all told, it could be up to $125,000. Just curious how we got to that point with one special event group versus another.
Excuse me, Mr. Mavrides, I'll address Hot August Nights. In Hot August Nights, prior to Barrett Jackson, we were getting approximately $110,000 in rent from Hot August Nights for their auction. When Barrett Jackson came in, we waived the rent for those 3 years, in addition to giving them some substantial marketing money. Now that Barrett Jackson is not coming back, we went to Hot August Nights and said, you know, we want to start collecting our rent again of approximately $110,000. I think our special event panel had agreed to award them 40. They came back and said, could you just reduce our rent to the convention center to a flat 50 and not give us the 40? Does that make sense? So they actually were kind of giving them 60-ish, if you will. But on the other hand, we are collecting 50 in rent from Hot August Nights, again, from our convention center that we weren't getting the last 3 years. So, and that was just more of what Mr. Juan came to us with, and we meeting with Mr. Lucey and Jennifer. Kind of came to a point to try to help them reestablish their auction and get it back up running. And I'm not sure that the other questions are.
Regarding the National Championship Air Races, $75,000 of the funding recommendation is a supplemental recommendation, assuming the board would entertain an increase in partnership funding. The NBC Sports package for this year's airing, last year's filming, was not a part of partnership funding. It was funded separately through the marketing department general funds. Staff not knowing if the board would prefer to have the air races include that within their partnership funding application. They were advised to go ahead and do that. That's why you see $125,000 for the air races. $50,000 is actually for their marketing efforts. The $75,000 is for the NBC Sports package, filming this year, airing next year.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, just one point, and it kind of addresses comments that the mayor made. The group determined who would be funded without any thought of how much money they would be given. So we developed a list of who we were going to support prior to even discussing $1. So it was like, okay, these are the guys that we feel have merit and we're going to support. These, for one reason or another, we don't think qualify. Now let's look at how we divvy that up with everybody that we would support. So if they didn't get money, they weren't on the list before money was allocated.
I just was curious of how it came up with that number, and you know, it seems incredibly low, and I think you can kind of look at it as sort of, you know, hand in hand with marketing dollars. I guess
That's all right.
I think everybody on that committee.
I just, like I said, I'd love to have an idea of what others are spending on. I just think it's very, very low, but it could work very well with our, and not to say that you weren't doing your job, I'm not saying that.
No.
I just don't think we have an idea of how much typically you invest in these kinds of things, and I want to make sure we're, you know, obviously very successful, because I think we have some special events that are pretty dynamic to the area, and I would just want to make sure that we can utilize them to the best of our ability.
I don't think there's a person that was on that committee that wouldn't have taken a larger bucket to divvy up.
Good, I like it.
Mr. Carasali.
I think the number we utilized for the last 7 or 8 years is because we didn't have any money. No money. Now we have a little money. Not a lot, but a little. So maybe we could increase it.
Little money is better than no money.
May I suggest that we review this as part of the strategic plan? And when we have our board retreat, we can bring some information and the board can weigh in on policy with
Excellent.
that. Yeah,
Great.
excellent.
Mr. Mavrides.
And I agree, and can we add a caveat that as we evaluate these, and maybe you did this, that we look at the purpose of this group was basically room nights. how are these folks, or how are these organizations and events contributing toward room nights is one of the metrics that we use to fund them by. The reason why I suggested we keep it not an unlimited amount of money, but I trusted the committee's recommendations and to have an open mind and to look at some of the questions you've got about, well, should we be encumbered at a certain level, or should we consider a little more money for things that we think benefit the community? So it seems like it might have worked.
We have a great return on, right? So it's not just the spray and pray advertising effect, but I think the things that really benefit you, and we could probably dial it down and really focus on what those are. So, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mavrides.
Thank you. I think that, I think the one thing I will say is that Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Cunningham comprised a phenomenal panel to really dive down into and that data that they did was, there was room nights, there was the, structure of their board, what, how long have they been, what was their track record, and
Their financials?
Their financials. It was significant, and really, I mean, the data that was provided was substantial. Our binders were 4 or 5 inches thick, and so going through that, it was a long day, but we still were able to sort out what we felt were the most positive and most beneficial events for the area.
An example of where a subcommittee works.
Exactly where a subcommittee works, yes. But we have some issues with that moving forward due to the NRS. So anyways, aside from that. Okay, so with any further discussion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the board, of the panel.
I have a motion and a second, and just for some clarification, what dollar amount?
I don't have that right in front
And
of me.
I apologize, page 9 of 8, I mispaged it.
Do you want to 30 or with
Could be
additional
misleading. What I was trying to, the total dollar amount is $310,000. What I was trying to demonstrate is it represents a $45,000 increase over the current $265,000 budget. So it's $310,000
The
total.
$310,000 number is my recommendation.
Okay, I have a motion for a $310,000 special event funding.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Discussion, Mr. Lawson.
Were we gonna spend the $350, so are we gonna throw that 40 grand back in, or?
I don't believe that we're just going to spend the 310 at this point and not spend the 40. And I think that the discussion was had during the event panel that if there was any more funding necessary for any one of these events, that they could come back to the board independently and present to us as a whole for that extra funding.
So it's flexible is what
So
you're
we're
saying,
flexible,
yeah.
yeah. So this is just to get the bulk amount out right now to the groups, because some of them are timely that need to get going with that funding. But for the events that have some time that would like some more funding or didn't feel that they got adequately supplemented, they can come back and deliver to the board independently. Sound good? Any other discussion? I have a motion.
So quickly,
Mr. Mutters, I'm sorry.
the last piece that I see, I mean, all of this great work by the team as they went through this, but we're still talking about potentially $125,000 going to one of these individuals. So are we, as we're getting ready to approve $300 and some thousand, are we good with one group taking almost a third of this entire piece?
I would like to separate that the $75,000 is a TV package for our commercial. We have 5 commercials that will be airing on NBC Sports. So it's a little different than funding the air races to go out and market. A little bit of a
And so we did
caveat.
that previously
Is
in
that
the
under
past,
special
and it was
event?
roughly the same dollar amount then?
$60,000 last year.
Yes.
So we're looking like 15,000 incremental over.
Right, and it went up because the air races had to supplement a part of it last year, and they were hoping not to have to supplement it this year. And again, a reminder that it was not part of partnership funding last year. They were directed by staff to go ahead and include it, wanting to be transparent and not then requesting them to come back again to the board, requesting that component individually.
Mrs. Mayor Schieve.
Sorry, Commissioner. So Jennifer, wait, I guess I'm just a little confused. Shouldn't that be under advertising if it's a commercial for us? I'm confused if that, is that? coming
It
under.
falls in that gray
special events,
area.
So I'm a little.
I know,
I don't
it
like
falls in the
that.
gray area, and we just wanted to err on the side of being as transparent as possible. Yes.
Okay.
It really does, because we get commercial time.
I just want to make sure we're not taking away from any special events. I mean,
And that's why the panel was very judicious in only making that recommendation for the supplemental portion, assuming there would be a budget increase, and not including it as part of the primary recommendations, assuming no budget increase. And the NBC Sports package theoretically can also help build their future attendance and marketing by exposing the event.
oh, I would agree
Yeah.
with you. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
National television exposure is critical for us. It really is, because it does set the tone and the perception of who we are nationally, without a doubt. And matter of fact, I'm putting together a video because I want everyone to see why it's important to have that national exposure. So I would agree with that. I'm just a little concerned, are we sort of commingling funds in different departments, and then that way it dilutes what we need to really give to special events, because they get very little money as it is right now. And I want to just make sure, should that be under advertising, but I also don't want to halt this process, because I really believe that it's a great opportunity, and I'm really excited. So I'm not trying to be difficult. I just, maybe more clarification, because we're trying to figure out the numbers.
Well, as a point of clarification really quick, last year we did the special event funding, we gave them their basic ask, and then when they came back for that secondary ask, it came out of the marketing budget. So last year it was separated out and accounted for in two separate budgets.
Okay.
This year the ask was so that, and I think, so Jennifer, when she was saying clarity and transparency, it was an easier push for them so that we have a better understanding of what the whole package was at one time versus breaking it out over a period of time with the board. And this transpired, I know, in the first few months of some of the new members being on the board. And so it was a lot for all of the board to take on at that time. So this is just kind of combining it. So, but I agree with you that there should be some differentiation in regards to where that funding is coming from and how it's spent, so that we can adequately spend it in other places if need be.
Right.
Mr. Mavrides, really quick.
So just to clarify, you feel, because I'm looking at this as advertising, you feel that this is a good use of advertising dollars as you prioritize where to spend our advertising dollars?
5 commercials nationally for $75,000 is, you can't even touch it.
Right.
And, and the other thing I want
Motion on the floor, Mr. Chair.
there is not a motion yet.
Yeah.
And
Make
then,
a motion, please.
oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. There is a motion. I apologize. There is a motion currently for $310,000 by Mr. McGovern.
And I want to clarify my motion just to make sure everybody understands. The 75 doesn't take $1 away from any special event. We're asking for an additional 75 to make it 310.
Okay.
So, I have a motion. Do I have a second? So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Congratulations. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Moving forward, request for proposal RFP, American Association of Nurse Practitioners, AANP. Mr. Leinen.
Yes, thank you. Back in November, we had the opportunity to provide a site inspection for nurse practitioners. They were looking at us for a smaller event called their Specialty and Leadership Conference. During their visit here, they were blown away by our product, our destination. They ended up booking that particular program at the Peppermill for October of 2017 using 500 peak and 2,100 total rooms. While they were here, Jennifer Bumbelow out of our DC office very smartly got them to take a look at our center and give us an opportunity to put ourselves on the map for their annual. When they looked at the center, we came to realize from their programming and all that kind of stuff and the way things would flow, we're about 75,000 square feet short of being able to accommodate their program. But we want to leverage their enthusiasm for the destination, their enthusiasm for the product, and the things that they walked away with knowing, wow, what a destination that we'd love to come to. They kept saying, can you build your center bigger? We'd love to eventually get here. Obviously, we can't do that at this stage, but we want to go back to them with an alternative solution to change their program format which would involve moving some of their luncheons that are hosted by their major pharma partners, pharmaceutical companies, take those luncheons, make them a dinner event, move it off property to free up the space so that they can expand their convention center. Making an adjustment like that's a big part of their program, and we need some financial support to incent them to make a change in their program like that. In addition, to accommodate their program, we probably are going to need to expand and put in a temporary structure, which is something that we've done in the past with Safari Club. So my ask to the board here is to help us provide that financial package that allow us to go and bid on this. You have the outline of the total revenue opportunities. The peak block here is 4,200 rooms, which is obviously a very large size event for us. The total room nights are close to 21,000 room nights. The food and beverage spend, their RFP conservatively put it at $750,000. When we do the math and look at their program, it's probably closer to $1 million, which is a far greater food and beverage spend than most groups we ever see. The other great thing about this group in particular, we want to open our doors eventually to the medical groups. We don't tend to do well with the medical groups. The nurses is an opportunity for us. We'd like to get up into the doctor range and all that kind of good stuff. This group can have a tendency to repeat. For example, they were in Vegas in 11 and also Vegas in 13. They were in New Orleans in 15. New Orleans is on the hunt for a rebook in the future. They go to great first-tier cities, Philly, San Antonio, Nashville, Vegas, Orlando, Phoenix. So for us to be in the game, we got to throw some really strong incentives at them. My expenses that I'm looking at, temporary structure for a 30,000 square foot space, rough and tough is around $200,000. Transportation, which they have partially paid for in the past or paid for in general, is a big nut. That's about $220,000 in transportation. Very, very expensive. Well, I'm sorry, we're asking the customer to pay $100. Total of transportation is probably close to $320. We need some cost neutral to be able to, for them not incur extra costs on their food. We'd have to pay for $60,000 to stay neutral on their food and beverage spend. So all in, I'm asking for about $500,000. Since this report was generated, just recently, we received a diagram back from Freeman. And I'm very excited that perhaps our planner and our customer was overestimating their square footage needs. So we may be able to go back to them with a better floor plan than what they saw when they were here. That'll give us a further opportunity to say, we need to stay in the game here. So with that, I'm asking for some financial support so that we can go back to them with a winning package, motivate them, and get in the game to be considered. We're not considered now. We don't have an RFP. We just they've ruled us out. I need to jump back in and turn their heads and leverage their enthusiasm for the destination to give consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Lynham. Mr. Mavrides.
I applaud your creativity in trying to fit them into a building maybe too small for them. The only question I've got is it's mostly midweek and you've got a $150 room rate. I hope we're in that neighborhood in a few years, but that seems pretty high for your assumptions. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you. That room rate is what our core partners probably would have, which would include some of the offsets that they would be paying for. But based on what we've seen from our core hotels that would participate, that's right in range, and actually it's probably lower. In my other assumption was that most of it's midweek. There will be some displacement. You'll look at, I lowered the room block usage down about 30%. To try to present a conservative approach to our room tax collection. For those who are under displacement would be how many rooms are coming into the market over a weekend. They do hit a Friday night. Our hotels are probably going to be full anyway, so this would create some displacement by that demand that's there. Compression, correct.
Mayor Schieve.
Thank you so much. I would like to get some feedback, certainly from the gaming industry, because I don't know, I mean, is this normal? This seems like a lot of money to be.
I'll give you an example, Safari. Safari Club, this is less than what we paid Safari Club, and this
Well,
is,
they were very well known. They'd been in the market for a long time. They, you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, this seems extremely high. But this is not the industry that I know about, but I certainly know for your industry, it certainly is. So maybe it is normal.
Mr. Carasali.
Well, I think that this is,
21,000, I get, it sounds like it's great, that's a lot, but I just want to know, is this standard?
this is the first opportunity we've had for citywide in many years. And I think we want to get back in the game on citywides for 32,000 room nights or whatever, then you got to stick your feet in the water. And I think that, and it's not a cheap arena either. So if you don't want to play and spend the dollars, then don't get into the citywide business.
Okay.
Because citywide, everybody benefits. And, you know.
That's why I'm asking you. I don't know, it just seems like a lot to me, and then again, you could go back and compare about special events and say, okay, what's the cumulative amount of room nights we get out of special events, and we spend half the money on that versus doing something like this. So that's all I'm saying is that, you know, sometimes I think when we're looking at things, being able to maximize every amount. I've never seen anything like this, and it's the first time I think it's really come up.
So I've been on board.
And so, just curious.
No, the reason you haven't seen it, we haven't had a citywide in 8 or 9 years, and have not been able to put one together. And this is the first opportunity that the RSCVA has to do this. And as I said, it's not an inexpensive game. If you want to get into the game, get your wallets out. That's the way it goes.
Mr. Mavrides.
It's not unusual.
Well, that was my
Thank you,
question.
Mr.
Is this unusual?
No.
Is this how it's done? I mean, it just seems it's $500,000.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think the $500,000 is,
Is this for writing that too? You know what I mean?
yeah, I concur with Mr. Carasali. Yeah, it is. I think the whole thing's built on a certain level of business coming here. My question, and that mitigates the risk. Matter of fact, they might even come out ahead a little bit. The question I have is, how do we know that 20,000 room nights are going to materialize? Is there any protections built into that? Because if they do, I think it makes total sense. If 10,000 show up or 5,000 show up, then
And then can you also, you know, say, hey, we need your commitment for X number of years? I mean, you know, really down making sure that they perform, you know.
yes, first of all, the room night projection, we did scale it down to protect ourselves from the revenue perspective. And then this is also in line with what their historical usage has been. And when we would put together the financial package, we would put parameters behind the minimum amount of room nights that they would need to pick up in order to receive these benefits. So we would do that. The other thing, Mayor Schieve, that is of strongest consideration is the transportation cost. Other cities, because they have a much better walkable convention package, they don't have to pay for that transportation. And that's if you look at that ask, that's over half of that goes towards transportation, which we need to overcome the cities that have a tighter hotel package to the convention center where they don't have to pay for shuttle.
The other thing is you mentioned too, they want us to be bigger and grow, but I got to tell you, we have a lot of event space now that's not utilized. So I want to be very careful when we talk about like, oh, we need you to expand to accommodate this and that. And so that's something I do want to be aware of. I've just never seen it, and you know, you guys are the experts, so I just want to make sure that it makes sense to you, and I'm certainly happy to support it if you feel like this is what our industry needs.
Mr. Carasali.
I was going to say, not only the room nights, but it's the ADR.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
$150 is unheard of
never
around
seen
here
this.
for a big group.
Mr. Farahi.
Mayor Schieve, you're absolutely right to question these things. I believe we need to understand, but we need to look at the gains to the hotel subsidiary. Again, we are not the headquarters, we are not, it's Peppermill and that, which to me doesn't matter because it's rising tide. The community does better, we all do better. So, but if you look at other revenues that, if those revenues materialize, again, if at 642,000, so basically we are you're breaking even, and the hotel, I presume is Peppermint is putting $250,000 in there, is that right?
We were anticipating asking for a subsidy from the hotels of $15. We haven't asked that yet. We haven't.
Per room where they stay?
Correct.
Okay, okay. So based on those things, sometimes we have to stick our neck out. Commissioners, the beautiful commissioners here, people come to this community, they have never been to Reno Lake Tahoe, and they get blown away. I gotta bring my family, I gotta send friends. That's why Las Vegas, over 30% of their business is conventions. So I think based on these numbers, it is a wise investment for us to get the job done.
Yeah, I would agree. I just think in the past, sometimes we've had a tendency to sort of jump before we have really known the true facts of bringing in a group and making sure that, you know, they are going to commit, making sure that they are doing what they say they're going to do. Because we've seen that in the past. So it just, at this dollar amount, you know, obviously, and like I said, you guys are the experts, so I'm going to certainly take your advice.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Carasali.
But I think, as I said, we have been out of the citywide business for a number of years. But since then, a lot of properties have improved. You have a lot more improved room nights. And you're sending a message to that part of the tourism community that we're in business for citywides. And again, once one, and this is a higher profile, a good profile, $150 is not unheard of, but it's a heck of a lot of, it's a great cash ADR. But when the word gets out, then the RSCVA sales staff can say, hey, we just booked the nurse practitioner group for 21,000 rooms. What about your citywide? So it allows you to get out there and start marketing other groups to go citywide that are going to Vegas, that go to New Orleans or whatever. So as I said, you got to, if you want to get into the game, that's what, but it also,
That's
it's
fine.
risk
I
reward.
mean, I want us in the game for
It's
sure.
risk reward.
I just want to make sure they're also
Yeah.
going to commit
And-
and say what they're going to say, because in the past, we've seen sort of a lot of commitments from people, and they have
better, and it
delivered.
really improves your national brand as a destination community.
Mr. Mavrides.
Just a quick comment. Again, I applaud your creativity. You look at a temporary structure of 200,000, and that seems like a lot of money, but the alternative is to expand the convention center to try to get into this business, and that would cost a lot more. I know we did that with Safari, and sometimes that's kind of a Band-Aid, so I applaud your creativity to try to fit them in.
All right, seeing no further discussion on this matter, I'm looking for a motion to accept the,
Make the motion, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion, do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Chairman,
Yes.
this is not right to hold us past 12 o'clock without lunch. Where's the lunch?
Joe?
Mr. Kelly? Would everybody like to take a quick break? I mean, we have some quick things to pound through, but I'm trying to get through it as fast as we can. Okay, so if everybody can hang on for a half hour, let's pound through it. Okay. All right. Moving on, we're on to convention sales booking credit and standard operating procedures. Yes. Sure. Mike, sorry.
In my opinion, and I've discussed it with someone else on the board, it wouldn't be a lot better to go back and revisit this when we have a new CEO, so that person who's going to be our CEO and run the RSCVA has input in what he thinks these conditions should be, or for booking a room night. I mean, because whether or not, if we go through it now and a new CEO comes in and doesn't agree,
right?
I mean, we kind of wasted our time and et cetera. So that's just my opinion.
I kind of have a tendency to agree with you. I think that.
I'm sorry, one last.
Go ahead.
We just go with what we got. Just go with what we got until we get the new CEO in.
I have a tendency to agree with you, Mr. Carasali. I think that this is important, that during our strategic plan process that we're working through this is something that we'll address over the next few months and with this new CEO. So
I'll make a motion to table this item until a future date.
I have a motion to table the item. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
I have a second from Mr. Farahi. All those in favor of tabling the item this time signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. We did have public comment signed in for this, but since the item has been pulled, we're going to stage that. So, item number 4, financial support for new air service, Southwest Airlines. Mrs. Cunningham.
This is kind of an old,
Hold on one second. We
yes.
do have public comment on this item. Miss Brandhorst.
Would you pull that too, please?
Pull this item. Unfortunately, I can't do that, sir. Oh, goodness gracious. You're killing me, dude.
Which one is it, 3 or 4?
We're on item 4.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I am the United States President. I am too asking the questions. The amounts are quite high. $100,000 to fund any shortfalls in the Southwest Airlines. Well, it looks like it's from Reno to Oakland service. I just wanted to tell you again that the lawsuits are still growing, and they will continue to grow as long as the customers are shot down with bullet holes, and each and every individual will be a lawsuit. And they will be against the ones that carry the machine guns. They are the ones that have the lawsuits. And they will have to pay every month, I heard, for their lawsuits to cover them, to keep them out of jails, to keep them out of prisons, and keep them from being executed, destroyed, and dismantled. Oh. And this is not supposed to be, but it has been in the area for a long time. So I just wanted to briefly tell you, how this is going to work. The Southwest Airlines had customers on their air flight, and then somebody stepped in with a machine gun and shot them all down on the aircraft. So this is going to cost more than $100,000 to operate and to put this aircraft back into motion again. And so I just wanted to briefly tell you that this is going to be not operational until somebody fixes it back up again, because the aircraft is already filled with bullet holes. So I just wanted to let you know the blood and flesh too is all over the aircraft. So it says here, anticipated load factors and not materialize. I don't believe that at all.
Thank you, Ms. Brandhorst. All right. Seeing no more public comment on this, Mrs. Cunningham, please, staff report.
Okay, number 1, I can assure you Southwest Airlines has really good security, as does the TSA, so I'm not concerned about some of the issues just raised. Last year, we agreed on a verbal basis with the airport and the Regional Air Service Corporation to support this new Southwest Airlines service. This is more of a formality because I wish to bring it in front of the board to weigh in on a significant commitment. It will hit fiscal year 2016-17, but it is a $100,000 contribution from our organization. So with that, are there any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Carasali.
I would support this 100% for $100,000 based on what you heard from Mary Lee Moore and being on the airport authority. Net risk mitigation is necessary. when you're playing the game of trying to get with the airlines for a new aircraft for better air service, and it just that's the way it is. So I would support that 1,000%.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lawson.
My only question is, do they have all the funds they need? I know from the airport they needed 250,000, I think it was.
Yes.
Will this 100,000 keep them at that 250 that they need?
There's a small amount of money they're looking for in addition from the business community, but we have the Regional Air Service Corporation putting in 75,000. We have the business community, I think they're about like 60. But in in last month, they did the press conference. They're moving forward with this commitment.
This is not money we necessarily are going to spend. So I'm saying if we need to pledge the extra 30, 40, 50,000 bucks, let's do it because we may not spend a nickel on this. I just don't want the airport to be short and have any hiccups on these flights.
That's good. And I just think it's important. We didn't bring this to the group, but you guys all need to be involved in our air service development and know what we're working on. So,
Mr. Carasali.
But to put it in perspective, from being on the Airport Authority Board, when we made the deal with JetBlue after many years of negotiation, the mitigation on an annual basis is 1.6 million, and that's between cash and in kind. So, as I said, the legacy flights, which would be the flights we fly across country, the number was arrived at by JetBlue telling us that their operating cost for 1 year was 16 million, and they would be nice and charge us allow us to come in for 10%. So the closer in the airlines are, whether it's regional or whatever, the costs are a little more reasonable. But any way you look at it, the costs are going to be there for whatever aircraft that you try to book to come into Reno.
Mr. Mavrides.
Quick question. It says Reno-Tahoe. Who exactly put the deal together with Southwest? Was that RASC?
It was the Reno-Tahoe Airport and RASC, right? Or
just to clear it up, because I'm on the airport, I'm not the know-it-all, but just to clear it up is that the airport authority does all the meeting with airlines. They meet on a monthly, quarter, whatever basis, and all these different conventions and so forth. They then find an aircraft. They then do all their vetting as to whether that particular destination will work for this community. When they feel that's correct, all they can do is forgive the landing fees or certain other costs, and that amounts to roughly $200,000. They could do no more based on federal aviation regulations. Therefore, it becomes up to the community, which now and that's why we have RASC. If another $500,000 is needed or whatever it is, then that ask goes to RASC, vetted by the airport authority that says we feel that this particular flight will work for this community, and then it's up to RASC to talk to all their members if they have the money up there or not. And on an annual basis, they raise approximately $513,000. That's what everybody pays in. Could be higher now with a few more members, but if you imagine how many times we had to go around for the 1.6 million, but it's cash plus in kind. That's how it works.
Thank you, Mr. Carasali. Mr. Farahi.
Thank you, Mr. First, you're all invited to peppermint for lunch after this meeting. Second, let me tell you, I had the pleasure of sitting on the airport authority a few years ago, and a study was done by Professor Kambiz Rafi from the University, UNR. Every flight that we get to our community brings between $25 to $30 million economic gain to our community. So this is each flight. This is 3 flights a day coming in. It is tremendous. So I think it is always ROI, return on the investment. For return on investment, $100,000, I make the motion for approval, please.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Findlen. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And let the record show that Mrs. Schieve is absent for that vote. All right. That concludes agenda item 4. Next item, Mr. McGovern, will you?
Chairman, I recommend that items 5 and 6, the reports be accepted as submitted.
I have a motion to accept the motions as it. All right, we have a motion to second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. Moving through this thing. Okay. Finance Committee, transient operation lodging statistics and tax department performance. Do you want to do that one again?
I'd like to make a motion that it be accepted as submitted.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? A second. I have a second with discussion. Mr. Lawson.
Something we talked about in the Finance Committee meeting you should be aware is the collection of some of our bills for the folks at Lake Tahoe that have the condos that rent out. And we're, Chairman Lucey's going to look into seeing if we can include a bill with their tax bill. Just as a way to collect more money. Because I think 90% of people are honest and will pay it. They may just not be aware of it. So,
thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mr. McGovern.
I amend my motion to be committee items 1 and 2, not just 1.
Thank you. Seconder, do you accept that amendment? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to number 3, public hearing and adoption of certain clarifications and revisions to the RSCVA's transient lodging tax and surcharge. Mr. Kennedy, please take it away.
Sure. So before we begin the discussion, I just want to read a statement into the record that has to do with disclosure and some NRS requirements. Mr. Chairman, as part of the agenda item, this board is being asked to consider revising the existing transient lodging tax regulations by exempting certain hotel revenue from collection of the existing surcharge. As the board is aware, board members Farahi, Carasali, Mavrides, and Winters are owners and or employees of certain hotel properties which are subject to payment of the subject surcharge. As such, each is required pursuant to NRS 281A 420 sub 1 to disclose that a potential conflict of interest exists, and that if the proposed change is accepted, the property with which each is associated receive a monetary benefit as certain revenue which it collects would be exempted from the payment of the surcharge. This statement is being made to satisfy the statutory disclosure requirement. Notwithstanding, pursuant to NRS 281A 420 sub 4A, it has been determined that each is entitled to vote on this matter as the benefit received by the property with which each is associated is the same benefit which we'd receive by all of the hotel properties which are subject to the payment of the surcharge.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Chair.
One second, Mr. Carasali.
Before we get rolling, I talked to Brian earlier. We have a statute, right, that he lives by or that he follows as far as assessing the taxes. And so apparently there's a gray area. Can't legal clean up the gray area? So we have, working with the NRA or whatever and saying, this is what we're going to agree upon. This is the rule we're going to follow relative to these issues, because we could sit here and play it all day and it's gray and it's this and it's that. What do you think, Council?
I think what we really need, it's really a policy decision. So SB 312 that imposes a surcharge imposes it on the per night charge for the rental of a room, but it's not clear what that means. So
that's what I'm saying. Can't we get an interpretation from you, working with the NIR, with whatever, so at least he's got something to work with that's etched in concrete, and that's it, based on communication.
So the bill vests the regulation-making authority in this board. And so really what we're asking today is for this board, you can take the input from the NRA, from anybody else that wants to comment on it, and this board make a determination as part of establishing its regs, whether or not you decide that the language in the statute, which way it applies. I mean, it really is a policy decision that is for this board to make.
I think, Mr. Carasali, I think the discussion that you're talking about has transpired, but maybe needs to transpire further. So that you might need some more clarification, because we've been brought forth 2 different edits of the regulations, so to say. And so I think it would be, is that acceptable to you, or do you want to?
No, I wouldn't think that the hoteliers are going to agree to give you more money, and you certainly want more money. So I mean, you can be here like this,
right,
until somebody says whether it should be through legal, I would think, that says this is the way it is.
But I think then at that point, then we would have to hire a third-party attorney.
Well, I mean, to be clear, so we've looked at the statute. I've discussed it with the tax collecting department, and I think their interpretation, their stance is reasonable and legally defensible. If this board decides it wants to go the other way, I think it has the power to do that under its regulation-making authority. So it really is, I mean, the bill vests the regs in this body. And so I'm certainly happy if we want to discuss it later, if we want to go back and speak with the NRA representatives and see if we can find a middle ground. But at this point, really, the tax department has taken one position that certain revenues are subject to the surcharge. And it sounds like there are some properties that have said we don't think it should be. And that's really a decision that's up to this board to make. I mean, my position that we've made since SB 312 was enacted and since we've been responding to inquiries from the hotel properties since it became effective, and the information we provide on the website has been to take the position that these certain revenues are subject to the surcharge. And so the NRA wants us to take a different position. That's really up to this board to decide which way it wants to go on that.
Oh, okay. Mr. Farahi?
I want to tell you, I'm a little bit confused, so.
Could I introduce the item real quick so that
Yeah.
everybody's clear? Okay.
Okay.
So at the high level, what you have is our regulations did not have applicable surcharge information in it, which is what started this process. So Mr. Kennedy, myself, and staff went through and added the applicable language to allow us to enforce and collect the surcharge that was imposed through SB 312, which we implemented in July and August of this year. We've got some comments back from the El Dorado group prior to the Finance Committee meeting, which we brought into the regs that are before you today. And essentially there's three sections, which is Exhibit A, 3.1.1, 9.1, and 9.2 that are in question. I believe everybody else is on board. I don't want to speak for Mr. Pani or El Dorado, but I believe everybody else is on board with all of the other proposed changes. What we're really discussing are these three sections. And to boil that down, the issue at hand is if I book a room through an OTA, so I go to Expedia and book a room, and I no-show, currently the OTAs are collecting room and tax and remitting that to the property, but not the surcharge. And that's really the disconnect there, is that the properties believe that they're coming out of pocket for the surcharge, but they're receiving room and tax on those rooms currently. And that's really the divide, that they're asking for exclusion on rooms that are not actually occupied, in a nutshell.
Based on that information, I would support this as well, and I would like to, because if the property does not collect that surcharge, the property should not be obligated to pay that surcharge. Is that right? Is that the bottom line?
That's the question. Our opinion at the staff level is that you're receiving the funds from the OTA, and actually our strong preference would be to try to work with the OTAs to have them collect and remit the surcharge as well as the tax.
Well, if we can do that, it would be even better. It would be even better.
Okay. So I have a motion in support.
To encourage that we collect it from OTAs, they get enough money out of all of us. So we can have the money for our marketing purposes and that. So let's do that. If we cannot collect it from OTAs, then we would revert to that the properties are not obligated to pay the surcharge.
Mr. Kennedy, this would be a question for you. I'm not sure how we can do that, being that the OTA signed the contract with the hotels from a legal perspective.
Right, so I think what we have is we've got an extensive red line with lots of changes that has been approved and vetted by the Finance Committee. I think those need to be approved. And then the question is, do those regs get approved in addition to this change here exempting the non-recovered funds from the surcharge?
Exactly, Ben.
And so I think we would approve the regs, we would approve this change, and then the understanding would be that it'd have to be the hoteliers would have to approach the OTAs and try to get them to start collecting the surcharge, and then if they did, I think we'd have to come back and change the regs again to remove the unoccupied language. Or the alternative is to pay it, go try to get it changed. If you can't get it changed, approach again, and then we can exempt it. So I guess you've got two options there.
Okay. Mr. Lawson?
Do we have a dollar figure on what this is? Be a great minds.
Good question.
Mr. Mavrides and I have spoken, and I don't know if you're willing to disclose the amount that we contemplated at your property on an annual basis.
It's a real guess, 3,000 to 5,000 a year for our property. So you more.
5,000, you taking our time here?
Well, our property.
I was thinking that.
Yes.
Again, this wasn't an issue. The tax is being remitted, the revenue is being received at the property. This has become an issue as the surcharge has been spread across to the other facilities.
Hold on. Hold on. Mr. Findlen, please.
A little bit different than the surcharge. There's also some red lines in this document. Is that being contemplated as well?
Sure. So if you look in your board materials, you've got an entire red line of all the room tax and regs, which is 20-some pages. So what Mr. Pawnee's done is taken the language from that red line. So the red line language has been approved by finance. The highlighted language is the language that he'd like to see in addition.
Mr. Pawnee's here, and he's actually submitted for public comment. Mr. Pawnee, if you could step up to the podium and help, vet some of these questions for us, please.
Good afternoon. For the record, Michael Pawnee, McDonald Carano Wilson, on behalf of the Eldorado, Silver Legacy, and Circus. I'm happy to answer any substantive questions on the change. I think you've got the gist of it. The issue is whether or not you can collect a surcharge where the room hasn't been occupied. And our position is that we believe the statute's clear. Surcharge is not a tax. It's not a tax on gross receipts. It's a charge on the per night rental of the room. And if you don't actually have a rental, the surcharge never kicks in. So the question for the board is, what do you do in those circumstances where you have a reservation that ends up being canceled? The room's never occupied, there's never a rental, there's never money collected for the rental. Do you make the operator pay out of pocket for this? And our position is no, that's not fair. I can get into a lot of details about that, but I think you get the gist. One suggestion I might have, because I kind of see the conversation as you're having it here, is you could approve the regulations with the changes we proposed and maybe add some verbiage that to the extent the operator is able to collect the surcharge on a canceled room, the operator must remit that to the RSCVA. That would enable the operator to work with the OTAs, and if we can get it from the OTAs, great. We'll pay it over to the RSCVA. If we're not able to collect it from either the guest or the OTAs, then there's no obligation to pay it out of pocket.
Chair, I amend my motion to include Mr. Pawnee's recommendation, that would be my motion, to approve this with that additional commentary.
So I have a motion currently. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Law. Further discussion?
Yeah, I still have some questions about what's being redlined. You're redlining or within a 20-mile radius of the downtown district. So is that saying that all of the hotels and resorts in the county would be paying the surcharge?
The only changes I've made to what your staff has recommended in my letter are the parts in yellow highlight. The other red line changes you see are the recommendations from your staff on changes to the regulation.
So Brian, can you comment to that?
I can clarify that. So we took the existing regs and we tried to fold the surcharge into it. And as part of doing that, we had to define the downtown surcharge district, the 20-mile radius surcharge district. So I think the change you're looking at, and I don't have Mr. Pawnee's.
Section 1.27 is where the surcharge districts
So it's just a different
defined.
way to define it, but it makes clear that that surcharge is the district created by SB 312, which is the 20 miles from downtown
within the
Reno.
20 miles.
We've just redefined it to try to make it read better and easier, but the net effect is the same.
Well, I have an issue with that. I'm glad you asked. What about the properties that are in the other district that are paying the surcharge? This does not apply to other property?
This attempts to roll the entire surcharge,
Exactly.
room
So
tax
all
regs and
surcharge,
everything.
okay.
Yes.
As
But-
long as it's all surcharge.
Yes.
Will fall under the same regulations.
Thank you.
So I have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion at this time? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Show the record that Nat Carasali is left as well. All right. Thank you for that. All right. We've got
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I apologize. I have to leave too because I have a meeting. I just want to add to that interview you're having with marketing firms that are coming. One of the things we make sure that the person who's going to do the research has to be here that day, because who does the research makes a huge difference. It's not only the company, we like that person. If they're interested, not only the firm's president or whoever is coming to make the presentation, but who's going to be doing the study for us, who is going to have our account, I should say, needs to be here for us to question.
The primary person.
Really quick, we're almost done, so just one thing. So on to 5, we have the appointment of the board member pursuant to 244A 6011D, representing Incline Village Crystal Bay CVB interest. This is in replacement of Mr. Findlen, who will be leaving us. His replacement is Mr. Wood. Mr. Kennedy.
Yep, I don't have much to add. I mean, you've got the letter in your materials nominating Mr. Wood. This appointment would become effective February 1, so for the next board meeting. And once again, it's open to discussion by all, but can only be voted upon by public officials.
Mr. Lawson.
I'll make a motion to approve Mr. Bill Wood.
I will second that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mr. Wood, welcome to the board. Appreciate it. All right, thank you. 6, legal counsel report.
Wait a minute.
Nothing to report?
Yep. No report?
No report.
Let's see, no report at 6. I would like to move on to recognition. Now that it's through this long and lengthy process of a meeting today, thank you for all that stuck by us. With the appointment of Mr. Wood, we're going to be losing one of our prestigious and revered board members, Mr. Findlen. He's been a very strong voice here in on the board, and has, for me, led with a lot of direction and come from a great place and for the benefit of the community. So, in recognition of your service here on the board, I'd like to give you this plaque for your service from 2010 to 2016.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we never got an invitation from Hyatt. We never got posted there. I want to say that for the record.
All right. Any board member comments regarding items for future meetings?
Move to adjourn.
Hold on, I got to do one public comment.
We have one public comment. I need enough people to stay to be able to adjourn.
Okay. One public comment. Mrs. Brandhorst, please. Miss Brandhorst.
Madam President. Madam President.
Dude, that was a hard press. Go. I'm already timing it.
So if we all leave, you don't have a quorum to adjourn?
I'm stuck here. in perpetuity till February. Go ahead, Miss Britt.
Okay. My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I'm also the United States President. I just wanted to add a little bit about the airport. The problem is with Jet Air Blue. I don't agree with this at all because it does go down into Mexico, the old border. And when the aircraft is full with the U.S.-born passengers, they never return back to the United States or back to Reno either. So I just wanted to let you know I disagree with this JetBlue. And also the guns that are being deported out of Mexico and back into the U.S., because they were stolen from the U.S. in the first place. I just wanted to tell you that the guns that are still being brought out of the Mexico border back into the United States is still being brought into the United States by aircrafts and by air jets. And who's doing this? I have no idea, because they are using these machine guns by Obama. And I just wanted to tell you that Obama passes them out to people who are coming across the border of Mexico. So I don't know if anybody will be stopping this or not, because it says mail on the aircraft and not guns. So the mail that is being brought into Reno area, the mail is parked, the aircraft is parked on the airport, and the mail is still inside the airplane, and they said that the people are on death row that are still opening up the mail in the aircraft that's parked at the airport, and this is against the law because it's mail fraud, and this mail does not need to be opened by anybody else except for the person that gets the mail themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Brandhorst.
Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Holy mackerel. Dude, take this easy. You did take this easy. That is not the way I wanted to get this off the ground. Kevin, good to see you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Sorry about today, man. Oh, man.
Interesting parts. Tony reached out to me about some summer concert series.